Have you heard my argument for why we should be doing this in America versus going to third world countries?
Go ahead.
Um, Basically, all power is ultimately derived from the consent of the governed. Like during COVID, like David and I have talked about this in Mexico, the only reason it wasn't worse in Mexico is because of government incompetence to be more like tyrannical. Like the will of the people wasn't there. That and firearms rights, right? And so, like you saw this in some of the South American countries. I think was it Costa Rica, where they were very like just blasé about COVID. And then one of the globalist guys, part of the NGOs, whatever, went down with a briefcase of cash, talked to the leadership, and then they cracked down harder than anybody. It's easy to bribe them, and the people don't have the willingness to push back. Like part of what makes America unique is the all nations have a creation story that is the mythos of who they are as a people.
And I'm trying to bring that back for America too.
Yeah.
It's we the people. Like we
Yeah.
have the power, and it works. That's why I'm trying so hard for all this. Is it does work, but it takes a lot of work from the people to band together and push back to all of it.
Yeah, because tyranny grows until somebody says no.
Yep.
And the longer you wait to say no, the more expensive saying no gets. But part of the spirit of America is our creation story is a creation story of rebellion. Like
Yeah.
revolution for the sake of freedom and autonomy, right? Self-sovereignty. And you see this in a lot of times in American history where Americans they're asleep and they get pushed, they get pushed, they get pushed, then the nation just wakes up. And it's like America as a people is like a sleeping bear, and it's dangerous to rouse us. And you mix that with the fact that we're not as free as we used to be, but we still have the structures of the federalist system. And that gives us capabilities that no other nation in the world has because of the localization of power. Like the county sheriff is I would argue, the most powerful office in the U.S. because he is the one who gets to choose which laws get enforced, right? You see this back in Virginia in the 2019, the assault weapons ban they tried to push. Governor Northam pushed banning ARs. The Second Amendment sanctuary swept all the counties, like 100 plus counties, said if you push this in the state level, we're not going to enforce it in our county. All the citizens very much showed up at their county legislators you make us a Second Amendment sanctuary. He threatened even worse to revoke funding and support at the local county sheriff level from the state. And then that's when everybody in the state got together and marched armed on the Capitol lawn with 70 or 80,000 Virginians, right? And then he finally backed off. The reason it worked is because all of the county sheriffs, and honestly a lot of the law enforcement, and just in general, even the state level troopers, were on the side of the citizenry. Because Virginia is kind of a microcosm of the nation. It's strongly rural, it's strongly farming based, and the voting's dictated a lot with the population centers of Richmond, Northern Virginia, around D.C., and the Norfolk Tidewater area. But the bulk of the land mass is freedom-loving people. And so the Federalist system allowed those people to have a voice to assert themselves in a way that was really healthy because the local power of the sheriff and the law enforcement was on their side. And we have that power structure in the U.S. still, where you have the federal government, then the states, and then the local counties. And the original government structure of the U.S. was supposed to be that any power not explicitly forbidden from the people was granted. Any power not explicitly granted to the federal government was forbidden. And it's kind of gotten flipped a lot in recent times, where we tend to assume the government has the power unless explicitly told no, and the people have to ask permission. Part of what I love about here in Oklahoma is the people still behave with a culture of a federalist mindset. Oklahomans just do shit. They don't ask permission. They assume it's their right to do so, and they assume the government has no right, which is the way America used to be. It's part of why I think
And to me, why it's flipped is by design, to where you don't rebel or you don't do exactly what you're saying.
correct, like Kissinger, right? Control the food, the energy, and the money, you control the people. And in Oklahoma, there's this awakening happening where I hear this story all the time, not just the last couple of years, the last 10, 15 years, where I'm meeting people. And it seems to be a strong thread of Christian, God-loving families who also are into homesteading and farming that are moving to Oklahoma, especially this northeast corner. It kind of branches some into Missouri and Arkansas, where they feel like they were called here. They're participating in regenerative agriculture to build the base level of society. And they're here because they feel like God told them to be here to bring like that heart of freedom, but also that strength of morality and large, strong families back. And so I have a lot of hope where, because of America having structures that give us a context to push back and the freedom loving spirit in the people, that even though people look at America like there's all these problems, it's like the center of the world stage, the world kind of rises and falls as America does. It's world reserve currency, global military power, all the things, right? That I argued with a lot of people about, don't go down to a third world country, right? You now don't really have real property rights because property rights are purely a network effect of local power. And you're an outsider now. Like, I own this piece of land. Like, okay, get against the wall, right? Like, it doesn't, like a piece of paper doesn't enforce it. It's the willingness of the local people to say yes or no of what's real from the government enforcement that makes property rights either exist or not exist. And the unique federalist system backed by the will of the people with the Second Amendment to actually have the ultimate power to say no means to me that being here in America, we have a lot stronger footing to be able to resist tyranny and assert freedom.
So how do we get like Oklahoma as a nation?
How do we get the nation to resemble what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
We need to restore the vitalism of the middle class in rural America. The nation rises and falls as the middle class rises and falls. Where like the power of who we are as a people has always been built on the production of the middle class, manufacturing, agriculture, right? And this gets back to like the things we talk about of agriculture just being a churn factory right now, regenerative ag, all the young people joining, looking at these YouTube farms, being all excited, thinking like, I can do this too. They join for 4 to 6 years, work a full-time job in order to have a hobby farm on the side, burn out, quit, fail, right? We need America to become producers again. And there's so many reasons why that's not really working well. I mean, we could dive into a billion threads. Like the macro thread, you've probably heard me talk about this before, Triffin's dilemma. Are you familiar with the term Triffin's dilemma?
Can you just explain it all?
So Triffin's dilemma, it's the idea that when your nation is the world reserve currency, that is an exorbitant privilege but also an exorbitant cost. It's a privilege of the whole world needs your money, and you got the advantage of this purchasing power for a consumer economy, and it makes your nation artificially wealthy. But in order for it to work, you have to run a negative trade balance because the whole world wants your money, and you're trying to buy the whole world's goods because of this kind of inflation, like currency power mismatch because of the world reserve currency dynamics. And it's a known phenomena that any nation who's a world reserve currency, over a generation or two tops, it guts your local productive capacity. I mean, it starts with agriculture, then manufacturing, it gets exported to other nations, just like we are now. Globalist economy, buying everything made from elsewhere, often foreign adversaries. And we've become a financial services economy where the whole young generation just feels like there's no space for the middle class to join and produce things. You mix that with all the other dynamics that tend to occur in parallel. Um, Inflation runs away from the young generation. Asset prices go up. Um, there's a lot of threads there in farming in particular, right? Like crop subsidies. They're one of the really big problems in agriculture. Do you know how crop subsidies work, like some of the main ones?
Can you explain?
So, corn and soy, the two big crops that happen in the U.S., they are insured against losses with crop insurance things, and the crop insurance is subsidized in the current farm bill basically up to a level of about 80%. Your production level with the insurance is based upon the last 10 years production of your land or like longer of like a rolling average or some sort. And so you have these older farmers who have their production records because they've been farming for a while. If you're a new farmer, your production records are based upon the county averages. The way this usually works out, you've got an older farmer who's got, I don't know, 10,000 acres or something they're cropping on, or 5,000 acres they're cropping on. They may be growing corn and with a level of like, I'm just going to pull numbers out of my ass, like, I don't know, 150, 175 bushels per acre or something. And the county average may be as low as like 75, 100, something like that, right? And so this young farmer, they get the subsidized insurance at a level of 80%, but the floor price of their production per acre with the government subsidized insurance is significantly less. And until they have 10 years or whatever of production records, they can't get the same level of base floor payment per acre from the government that the older farmers can. So you've got multiple phenomena happening. You've got like the gutting of the manufacturing base due to Triffin's dilemma because we're competing against the world. Like I was talking to some ranchers down in South America during the tariff stuff that Trump was pushing, and they were all really up in arms, like some Brazilian farmers I know. They're like, we're not going to be able to sell cattle in the U.S. It's going to crash the Brazilian cattle economy. And it's like, well, I don't really care about that. I care about the strength of my nation. They're like, well, that's so heartless. Just American ranchers need to be more efficient. It's like, this isn't really about efficiency. You guys, if you run the numbers, you could argue are selling your cows into the U.S. with about a 30% discount due to the currency mismatch, or the strength of the dollar versus the strength of a foreign currency. What small business, what ranch has a 30% profit margin that we just, I don't care about that.
None.
That's
Really, that's
your
unheard
whole
of.
that's your whole business.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I may be perfectly competitive. I may be exactly the same as efficiency, but they have a huge advantage selling into the U.S. because they get this 30% essentially premium that I don't get, right? So you've got that going on. You've got us competing against everything with basically currency games. You've got the young generation being priced out with asset inflation. You've got the young generation being priced out with crop insurance and government floor price of the backstop and the way that that works with production as far as like production level measurements and all that. Like another layer that'd be good to explain. I tend to say that like land is monetized as a store of value. Like Saifedean Ammous, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, he says that when a nation has a soft money, everything else has to become money because that's how its economy protects itself. So like you think about gold. Gold would be super useful for a lot of electronics, a lot of like industrial purposes, but it doesn't really get used because it's so expensive. Well, why? Well, it's more worthwhile for somebody to hold gold as money in a bank vault than it is to use that gold for electronics or useful purposes, utilitarian purposes. And the reason is the monetary premium of gold being used as a money is such a large portion of the value of gold that it outcompetes its utilitarian or productive uses, right? But the same thing has happened to land. The monetary premium of land as a store of value asset because of inflation in our economy with the money printing and all that happening outcompetes the utilitarian or useful purposes of the land. The land is measured as a money, not as a productive asset. And so you start layering all these things together. Like you've got the land's monetized, which is your main input into farming. You've got subsidized insurance for prices that the young people can't stay in business long enough to catch up and compete against. Young people don't also have the same access to like the cheap debt because they don't have the scale or the connections or the understanding of how to get access to these more complex like programs and like opportunities and grant structures. You've got just layer upon layer. I mean, we're at the point now where in rural America, like the government-backed debt programs that were meant to make farming possible, like the farm credit system. Have you heard the story of Dustin?
Kittle?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on my podcast and we went deep dive into his.
Can you give like just a quick synopsis for that so I don't have to give it?
Off the top of my head,
Like
yeah.
basically farm credit got weaponized against him to where they did something incredibly unethical to force him into bankruptcy so that his farm could be sold out to, I think it was like Tyson or something. So these government-backed debt programs that were intended to make farming accessible for the young generations are now being weaponized through corporate interest where the lobbyist money and incentives are to actually exclude the young farming generation and actually leverage those systems for the big monopoly agribusinesses, right? And so it's everywhere the door is just getting shut in people's faces. You layer all these things together, this is why, like, no wonder we have the phenomena of, like, The age of the average rancher is 58 and a half years old. For every 2 that retire, less than 1 are taking their place. The young people just can't clear the hurdle of all the dysfunction. So whether you're talking like debt access, like operating capital access, labor, like the rural economies have collapsed at this point. They're like, there's just not really a young generation of workers. The young generation feels really hopeless. They all try to go to college and then go get city jobs inside of that like financial services economy, which is the only productive part of our economy left, in order to survive just the erosion of America, right? And that's cascade all the way to the point now where everybody has a degree. Like nobody really in the young generation is really like a lot of them just feel like they're getting jobs well under what they should be qualified for. And you've got this spirit of just despair or even like nihilism in the young generation where they just feel hopeless. And this is where you see a lot of stuff where the young generation just gambles. And I like people blame as if like Bitcoin is a part of that phenomena rather than Bitcoin being an answer as a return to hard money, which is real accountability in the economy. But like you see this across like just all the meme coins and things. A lot of the older generation is like, why is the young generation just essentially gambling on tech stocks and vaporware meme coins? Well, they're hopeless. They feel like if they don't gamble, where are they going to get an opportunity? Like you and I, we were able to leverage Bitcoin to get our feet under ourselves as young people. And Bitcoin's real, and we understood that. So the risk was reasonable of understanding that we could leverage a hard money and the adoption curve of it to bring reality back into the world for our generation again. But the people who don't understand that, they're just sliding up to the roulette table anywhere they can because it's like, well, I'm screwed anyway. I might as well just try something to at least have a 1 in 1,000 chance to not drown. And so I see ranches all around me. Like over here in Oklahoma, there was a newspaper article a handful of months ago or something, and I think the place is called America's Best Steak or something. Multi-generational ranch, been running here in Oklahoma for a long, long time. They couldn't find employees, so they shut down. You see this across retail businesses, restaurants, where rural America has been so gutted of all the productive energy being extracted out, whether you're talking through monopoly agribusiness, foreign exportation and productive capacity, whatever, that the people are gone, the financial energy's gone, the sense of community's gone. All the structures we need to make a viable economy are missing.
I've seen that firsthand the last 3 years driving around. Just so many towns to where the typical square, it's all just empty and abandoned, dilapidated buildings.
Did you drive through downtown Strang on your way here?
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. It looks like a junkyard. You've got the little like volunteer fire station, the little town hall, and then it's just surrounded by just low-income houses where these guys have just got junk everywhere because it's what a nation looks like when you're collapsing. It's terrifying because middle-class rural America, it's the backbone of what America is. I mean, we're starting to get in a case now with the sovereign debt bubble. That world reserve currency game doesn't last forever. Eventually, like, it's musical chairs and there's nobody else left. And the Treasury's starting to buy more and more government debt. It's just being backstopped more and more blatantly by money printing. We've got the government price of interest that they're paying on our debt is now higher than what we spend on the military for national defense. It's wild. And at what point do we admit that we're just centralizing risk to make it more and more existential, like much like the housing bubble back in 2010, right? You protect things, you stack the risk higher and higher up the top, and then it just takes everybody down with it because you've eliminated the ability for creative destruction of the young generation to be entrepreneurs to solve problems on the ground to create leaps forward. I mean, the crop insurance is doing the same thing. The young people never can apply creative ideas. Like you think about Jason Mock. How do you say his name?
Mock, yeah.
Mock. Have you interviewed him? Familiar with him?
Mm-hmm.
He's doing the polycropping stuff. Really, really cool. Raising incredible yields per acre because he's doing multi-species cropping. Really pushing forward the edge of integrating kind of holistic thinking with some of his skill of like just mainstream commercial cropping. And the real problems there are the floor price of the crop world is set by government subsidy of the insurance stuff. If you're getting more total production per acre because you're raising more than one crop per acre, but your yield of a particular crop is a little bit lower, you're not hitting that floor price of the government subsidy to compete to where you got that security. The insurance markets with that subsidy is basically rewarding people to fail, and those who are producing more with the potential to have a more resilient system that's disrupting and actually producing more value at total per acre of food into the economy, they're punished because they're not focused on a monocrop to hit that government floor. And so we've eliminated the ability of the young generation to be creative and to actually solve the problems to bring vitality back to rural America again.
So why are you yourself ranching after everything you just explained?
Because despite everything, I still have hope. And
What makes you hopeful?
even if I didn't, I'd still be doing it. Because this is the thing we have to do to bring power back to our nation. But I think there's real potential. I think there really is real answers out there. Have you ever heard the quote by G.K. Chesterton on courage?
To be honest, I don't think I've even heard that name.
Let me pull this up. This is worth reading. He said, "Take the case of courage. No quality has ever so much addled the brains and tangled the definitions of merely rational sages. Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. He that'll lose his life, the same shall save it. It is not a piece of mysticism for saints and heroes. It is a piece of everyday advice for sailors or mountaineers. It might be printed in an Alpine guide or a drill book. This paradox is the whole principle of courage, even of quite earthly or brutal courage. A man cut off by the sea may save his life if he will risk it on the precipice. He can only get away from death by continually stepping within an inch of it. A soldier surrounded by enemies, if he is to cut his way out, needs to combine a strong desire for living with a strange carelessness about dying. He must not merely cling to life, then he will be a coward and will not escape. He must not merely wait for death, for then he will be a suicide and will not escape. He must seek his life in a spirit of furious indifference to it. He must desire life like water, yet drink death like wine. No philosopher, I fancy, has ever expressed this romantic riddle with adequate lucidity, and I certainly have not done so. But Christianity has done more. It has marked the limits of it in the awful graves of the suicide and the hero, showing the distance between him who dies for the sake of living and him who dies for the sake of dying." One of my mentors told me years ago that in order to affect real change in the world, you have to have the courage to see how deep the darkness goes. Because real hope is built on seeing the world clearly. And if you're not willing to face it with eyes wide open, you can't change it. And that's one of the problems we have in the young generation of rural Americans, where there's nobody providing real leadership for the restoration of America. There's lots of voices, lots of people talking, few that understand it, and few that are showing or clearing a way to solve it. Like I define leadership as providing the vision and the will for solving a problem. You see it clearly and can raise the banner for it, and you have the stubbornness and fortitude to stay the course until you can bring it into being, right? And it goes back to one of the gripes that I've talked with you a lot about, because you're meeting a lot of these people around the country, where so many of these thought leaders in the regenerative agriculture world, they're telling this story and conveying this message explicitly, but usually implicitly, that like, look, this is possible, I did it, you can do it too. And it's feeding this phenomena of the young generation being just thrust into this churn factory of failure. Because, like, I got a message a couple months ago from one of my buddies, Michael Kinsey. He runs Reverend Wild Ranch over in Georgia, one of the cutting-edge ultra-high-density grazing operations in the U.S. And it was of a thought leader that you'd probably recognize their name. I'm not going to throw people under the bus by naming names, but just kind of conveying principles. And they were talking about this class, seminar, whatever program they were launching, and the title of it was like, "Learn how to build a ranch from zero." And this was a person who had Or either a child of or a super long intern who had been there from the beginning with one of the big names in the industry, one of the like the giants we all know. And Michael was super frustrated when he texted me. He was like, this guy has no idea what it's like to build one of these operations from zero. He doesn't understand that the world he's been in has provided all these foundations to give him the opportunity to get to where he is. He doesn't realize that the social capital, the networking capital, the all the credibility and knowledge and everything that came with the world he was in means that he's swimming in the water of a world that's very different than what it's like for most of the young people in this generation, right? And Michael messaged me as like, look, like, why would any of us ever go to this class? This guy, he doesn't know anything about what he's teaching. Like, you should be teaching this class. You actually did this from zero. And I say this all the time. A lot of the messages being conveyed just don't work anymore. Like, it's not the 1990s.
Well, this is also why I'm glad we're talking, and why it's so challenging is most consumers get their information about agriculture and food online, so like Instagram. But then the people posting on Instagram, it's not even just that. There's just a massive wave of influencers who make these broad general claims or this advice or that advice, and they've learned a little bit about agriculture. But to the consumer, they seem to be the expert because they have no knowledge of any of this whatsoever. And so I know this is just why it's so challenging for people in the middle like me, but then also for farmers and ranchers. This is what I'm literally trying to figure out is how to get people to actually care and listen, because a lot of times the people they're listening to are misleading them and misguided. Because also what I notice a lot of the times is the very people shilling this information is from the beach somewhere that's not even in America. They're not even in America anymore. They're the whole kind of going back to the younger generations going to abroad. That's what's happening a lot. It's a lot of these people share their information online to get the funds so they could just get out and go live on a beach in some low cost of living place.
And they're making their money as influencers.
Yes.
Not people on the ground learning to understand the problem.
And I noticed this, it's why it's very difficult. Why I see this a lot in the middle to where they realize there's no money that they're making at all, and so they branch out. And that's why you see that's why I've seen a majority of people online that talk on holistic health or food or whatnot, it's Costco. It's all Costco. Grocery stores. No farmers and ranchers. I noticed this time and time and time again. It's really infuriating, and it legitimately pisses me the fuck off how we talk about Maha, we talk about health, we talk about food, and we talk to everyone but the fucking people that are producing our food. Mm-hmm. And and this is what I'm struggling to get at to the consumers. Like, it's very, that's why I'm trying to say, like, I'm asking you these very broad statements of how can we get them, because I'm kind of at my wit's end with all that, because I don't feel powerless per se, but that power continues to feel dwindling by the day. Mm-hmm. Because of that, that's why I asked this with the consumers. I don't know what to do, really. I mean, that's why I'm doing this trip, is I'm just throwing darts at the dartboard, seeing if I can ever hit a bullseye. Half the time I'm not even hitting the board, but I'm just gonna go run up and pick them up and go back and keep tossing.
Do it again, baby.
But I guess it just goes back to how can we, because it's a whole 0 to 1 example of getting consumers to actually care. Mm-hmm. Because again,
and to stop falling for the misinformation.
And
because they do care, but so much of it is getting short-circuited.
But that's why
by bad leadership.
But then also why, if you don't actually shake the hand and have an actual relationship and see an actual farm, you're still never ever going to get to where we need to be from the consumer standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm still trying to drive, is I don't know how to get people to actually do that. And I don't even, I'm kind of just rambling there, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a true problem, right? Where, like, we were talking with the farm tour earlier with Erin, my girlfriend, who Fresh RX Oklahoma. She was on a podcast where she does panels and things all the time. And she was recently on one that had a bunch of influencers on it. And these influencers who speak on Fox News all the time, they're international level keynote speakers. And They knew nothing.
Well, that's the thing too, because if they walk in and sit next to you, you will run laps constantly around these people. I can too, and I still don't. Me compared to you, I know absolutely nothing, and that's because I kind of saying like you can see the vision. Like I can see through all those people that post online immediately.
Yep.
Even just working on the farm I did for a few months, just that alone I can see
Yep.
through all these people that shill online,
Yep.
and so that's. I don't know. That's the thing that keeps me up at night. That's the thing that is very challenging.
Yeah, I was talking to a farmer the other day. Her name is Kat Robinson, something like that. She runs Robinson Ranch over, I think, Bixby area, South Tulsa. Um, she started gardening to raise quality food for her family to get them through health issues. And she ended up getting connected with Fresh RX. Fresh RX is run by my girlfriend. Little just quick synopsis. She got a bill passed in Oklahoma where doctors are prescribing to type 2 diabetics a health food program. She runs a group that's providing education, community support, and accountability, and then doing the logistics, providing regenerative quality fruits and vegetables on a every other week basis, and then they track health outcomes. What they're moving towards is a pay for outcome program where the insurance companies are paying based upon the clients getting better, which is actually a huge multiplier of saving healthcare dollars. And she, through her program, has actually helped a lot of market gardeners like Kat get off the ground to where she's been such a steady, like, institutional buyer, basically, that she's created this 4 level demand for really quality food in the Tulsa area. And Kat was able to scale up her operation, where at first she was just selling some fruits and veggies to her friends because she had an extra production and was just good at it and good at community building and storytelling. And then she got connected to Fresh RX and scaled up to where she's raising a lot of veggies now. And her and I were talking a week or two ago, me and Kat, and she just said, I constantly am frustrated about a lot of these conferences because everybody there, we keep having this feedback. We all say the same thing, like, get a fucking farmer on the stage. Like, get somebody who's actually been there and done it. Like, she had an intern who came from a really well-known agriculture-focused college who came and worked with her for a summer on her market garden. And she was laughing so hard because the student kept being like, look, this isn't what the textbook says. She's like, I know. I tried that 4 years ago. I've iterated on that a dozen times. It's just wrong. Like, you either like, we can do what they taught you in school, or we can do what actually works. And we see that in ranching. We see it in so many places. What's being taught is decades behind what's happening, right? And getting the world of consumers to understand what's actually real and cut through all that misinformation is a really big part of restoring the vitalism of rural America. Because you got to get the energy back to where the real things are happening again. Like back to that podcast Aaron was in with those influencers that are really well known. They're on the news channels and all that. I shared that around with some of my farming friends, and they all were just pulling their hair out. They're like, this is so much nonsense. It's destroying the credibility for all of us who talk about farming.
Well, that's the thing that's also infuriating is it's not only affecting just agriculture as a whole. It's destroying the trust,
Correct.
which is already very low because we're so disconnected as is, and so yeah,
And some of it's intentional.
yeah,
It's not that hard to leverage social media to get somebody really loud who's actually there for the sake of short-circuiting the movement of American energy towards food sovereignty and restoration of health of our people. And one of my favorite Bible verses, be cunning as serpents, innocent as doves. Good people tend to expect other people to be good people, so you tend to kind of be a little naive and not realize the games that are afoot. That's part of what's the problem with this food movement and health restoration movement in America is it's driven by the really good-hearted people who just want to raise healthy families again, right? And those people, they don't understand. Hey, the horses are running up the hill back there. It's beautiful.
whoa.
I wish we had that on camera. There's no way to flip a camera over quick enough.
Well, if you can do it on your phone, maybe.
Um,
Keep going though.
the those people, They tend to, because they're good-hearted, just expect other people to be, and they don't realize they're just being outmaneuvered by foreign adversaries or intentional big monopoly agribusiness operations in the U.S. that want to keep the U.S. weak. And we need to bring a level of savvy back into these conversations again to understand that, because it's really important. The energy of wanting to see rural America, health restoration in America, farming and agriculture restoration in America is a really profound, high energy movement right now. But despite how much media attention, how much podcasting being done, the level of conferences and conversations happening, very, very little real work and advancement is happening. And it's sad. And like, I don't think people understand beyond like a gut level, like this is a huge problem. Like we could talk about the big picture, right? Like one of my favorite books is Dirt, The Erosion of Civilizations by David Montgomery. He tracks the rise and fall of societies, whether you're talking China, the Romans, the Aztecs, all these different people groups through ancient all the way up to modern history of how when a civilization's investing in their soil fertility, they flourish generation upon generation. When they start extracting from their soil, they collapse within a generation, right? Like in America, you can look at this where, like Thomas Jefferson even said, like the quest to go west was a quest for soil fertility because we'd eroded it with the money crops, the cash crops of cotton, tobacco, and those on the east. And so the young generation kept going west. And our soil fertility, right? Like we were even known like the breadbasket of the world because of the rich soil in the Great Plains. I mean, the glacial deposits, but also the topsoil that had been built because of the ruminants, the bison, the large rotating herds just working symbiotically with the grasslands and savanna, right, to build this deep topsoil. And over generations and erosion, right, that has been flushed out to sea or blown away in the wind. I mean, you look at like the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. I mean, we're in Oklahoma. That's right where the heart of this happened.
Yeah, the Okies.
And we ended up surviving that, not collapsing of the nation, basically purely because of the World War. We got the nation awake and unified again behind, let's go be productive to manufacture tanks, airplanes, and bombs to go like enter into the like battlefield in Europe. And we won the war. We were able to impose our will onto the world. We became the world reserve currency and imposed a lot of debt on the nations that we defeated. And then we turned the machines of war, the factories of war, from instead of nitrogen for bombs was nitrogen for the soil, right? And you got like Earl Butts, food as a weapon, go big or go home, outproduce the world. And we got into trying to reductionistly overcome the fact that we destroyed our productive base of the soil. We used the soil basically as a mechanical substrate to hold roots while putting in low cost at the time chemical inputs in order to force growth, right? And we were able to do that because through being the world reserve currency, the petrodollar system, we were able to hold cheap energy access for our nation. Okay, you fast forward another generation, 40 years, 1971. You got the U.S. abandons the gold standard. We robbed the world because we were non-productive. We weren't actually being like profitable as an economy, and so we just use the fact that we're the big bully in the room just to ignore the fact and extract energy by saying like we're not going to pay you guys anymore. Fast forward another generation, another 40 years, you hit the 2009 and 10 housing crisis, right? Once again, like we have this economic tie back to the original root problem of soil productivity. And we're all the way to the point now where our whole economy is either playing like finance games or just pure vaporware, right? Like grocery stores. Most of the big grocery stores, they got really tight margins on the product. I've read before that grocery stores make most of their money not on their margins on products, but on their payment terms. You as a consumer go to a grocery store and buy something, you swipe your credit card, you pay them immediately, right? Or your debit card or pay cash. Most of the suppliers are on payment terms of net 90, net 180, or like I used to work in a plumbing company. I did service work for a really big chain of grocery stores in the Richmond, Virginia area. And they were terrible about their payment terms. I mean, you're talking a small plumbing company with 2 or 3 trucks on the road. they're doing probably 60+% of their business for this chain of grocery stores doing service work. They often wouldn't get paid. Forget 180 days. You're talking 270 days, 400 days, because the
From the
little
grocery
company
store?
by the grocery store, because they couldn't enforce it, right? Like they could just stop doing the work, but then somebody else gets the contract. And what these big corporations are doing is they leverage those payment terms to invest the money. They're hedge funds. The economy now makes its money on playing finance games. Like Apple, do they make more money on selling iPhones or fucking Apple Pay? Everything devolves into becoming a finance credit card company. Like construction equipment, finance terms, car dealer, finance terms. Like the other whole side of the economy is just vaporware, right? Like you cannibalize an industry like Twitter destroys mass media. They become this multi-billion something dollar company, but not profitable, and most of their history losing money and cash flow year to year, but worth more and more on the balance sheet, just playing finance games of capital extraction from the investor networks. Or like Uber, destroys the industry of taxis, and once again becomes this big equity play, but they're not really profitable. Like it's either you're playing finance games or you're vaporware playing the capital games of investor equity, right? And the young generation, you've got this brain drain from rural America. It was like, well, why try to be productive? We can't compete with Triffin's dilemma. We can't make this economy function because all the underlying foundations we need to do it here are gone. I might as well go join the city and play the games too, because at least I can get mine. And that's the real problem, back to that question of like, well, how do we fix this? Why do you have hope? Because as long as we have families that are saying like, well, my kids are smart, they're going to go play this game, they're going to win because the world's collapsing and they're smart enough to outpace that, like we're going to get ours. As long as that's our worldview, there really isn't hope. Because the boat of a society, it all rises and falls on the tide of how your fellow citizens are doing around you locally in the middle class, right? The real answers have to be where we behave like citizens again with a duty to society at large and a duty towards each other. And I see enough of the middle class, enough of the young generation that are beginning to admit that it gives me a lot of hope. Like Acres USA, you probably have heard that name before. They're one of the biggest
I
regenerative
went to their conference
agriculture.
last year.
Yeah, they're one of the biggest regenerative agriculture publications in the U.S. They've been doing it probably the longest since like the 60s or 70s. Their original mission statement from Charles Walters was that in order to be economic, agriculture must be ecological. And I really love that mission statement. It's this idea that regenerative agriculture, because of being ecologically grounded, you are more efficient and effective and productive. Because why wouldn't you be? You're participating in the solar chain of value. The more living your soil, the more effectively you're capturing solar energy through photosynthesis, the more resilient you are to do that year to year, the more you can produce, and the more you can build future fertility while producing, the more in the long term the value you're producing is actually able to win, right? The problem is that competing against these rapid short-term dynamics of finance games, you
Yeah,
have a really hard time starting to do it.
because that's what I wanted to actually ask next was, so from the consumer standpoint, because I read comments just constantly online and just hearing in person, they really have no grasp of the economics of agriculture at all. They see, especially as prices increase, like beef, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever they see that, they always assume that that means the rancher's taking in more money. But then on the flip side, we're seeing how most are barely making it. A lot continue to collapse.
Most, basically all.
But that's even that. Like they don't even
The
they don't
the
even,
average ranch in the U.S., if you don't factor land equity appreciation, I've read loses about 1.5% return on assets per year.
because we've lost 89%. I've said this quite a few times. Because whenever I went to the RCAF USA conference in June, they showed this diagram that we've lost 91% of hog farms, 89% of dairies since 1980, and then all the other industries, obviously, that continues to dwindle and become more centralized. But again, going back to the economics, the consumers really do not understand this or have a grasp of this at all. And I mean, I know it's case by case basis, but then they have apathy towards farmers and ranchers. Because that's another thing too I notice constantly is a lot of people are apathetic towards farmers and ranchers,
Mm-hmm.
and for XY reasons. But it's just the whole economics is just such a complex problem for the producers, but then also for a consumer to really understand everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we've been so disconnected. So trying to learn all of this at once is a lot, and then also trying to understand that this has been going on for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and we're finally seeing all of that come together. And now we're a net importer of beef. Brazil is about to top us this year on production of beef worldwide. And so just all these problems combined, I guess my question for you is how can you explain to consumer for them to really understand the economics of all of this and really understanding how difficult this is for you and all the other ranchers and farmers and even just like people on doing butcher. I mean, it's not
Mm-hmm.
just farmers and ranchers in the food system that are barely getting by.
It's the whole chain.
It's the whole chain, but the people at the top and the corporations that are reaping the huge dough. So yeah, I guess I know that's a
Mm-hmm.
very broad question, but I feel like you have a good understanding and can try to explain that to your best of your ability to the consumer.
Yeah, so when I spoke at an Acres conference a couple weeks ago, a month or something ago, what I did is I started with that mission statement they've had from the beginning. In order to be economic, agriculture must be ecological. And I said, I love this, but I would add to it. You have to measure value not just of cash extraction, but of value production over long enough time horizons. And in order to accomplish that, it must be rooted in collaborative relationships. And that's where the magic lies. Because with collaborative relationships, we are building local vitalism, and you're not allowing the energy to be extracted by VC or corporate big agribusiness. You can play these larger scale games where you actually can leverage the effectiveness of regenerative agriculture to be competitive at scale, right? I guess
When you say collaborative relationships, what do you mean by that?
any place where you're behaving in unity as a groups of middle class families so that you can play the large scale games effectively, right? Like, back to another statistic, 89% of ranches in the US are less than 100 cows. Of that tranche of ranches, the average herd size is 22 cows. Most of those farms are subsidized hobby farms because they have full-time city jobs, they farm at a loss, they're basically just harvesting the tax deductions. And that is one of the reasons we have this entire consciousness right now of middle class family farming is collapsing, has collapsed in America. Of we know that the bulk of farmers aren't effectively doing it. I think it's 6% of ranches in the U.S. produce, I think it's control 31% ish of the land mass, produce 75% of the beef. And that's not even getting into talking about the growth of like beef on dairy or the growth of the import markets and how that's just getting worse and worse and worse. We need to, back to the idea the hope is in, not trying to be overly individualistic of I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps alone. Like that whole thing is a LARP. The frontiersman families of early America, when they went west on the wagon trails, they didn't go as one family, they went as groups of families. You need the capability of having enough people relying on each other to be able to handle the hardship, to be able to come up with solutions, but to work together with enough energy to overcome the issues, right? Because there's so much stacked in the deck against us. So like for our operation, the way we did it, we came up with the herd share system, which I covered some of that story in the intro and farm tour stuff. But basically, we have on our ranch all the breeding stock in the program. A pretty large group of middle class families owns that breeding stock. So rather than taking their long term like cash holdings and owning it in like an ETF that's invested in BlackRock, buying up houses to lease them back to your children and destroying the future of your family, they decided I want to keep this energy inside like the business network locally that I believe in. And so we brought these people together, and then every year when the calves are weaned, we split the calves. They get some food security, they get some local asset security, and we as the farm or the captain, the steward who's boarding those animals gets to make the decisions, and the farm is able to have effective scale. Like Jaime Elizondo says that the economically viable scale of cow-calf operations in the U.S. is 500 head. If 89% of those ranchers are 22 head, they're nowhere near. But due to us doing this together with this collaborative model of herd shares, we're actually able to be at a size where we can play the games with the big boys. And the actual value produced through regenerative grazing is actually able to come to the forefront because we're at that game at the table at a large enough size that our advantages start to come to the forefront again. That's what it takes to rebuild the vitalism of a rural economy. Is we have to bring enough people together with unity that we can outcompete the people who are decimating and extracting the energy from rural economies.
So, I guess with that then too also, why is food, I guess from the consumer standpoint, they see it so expensive?
Yeah.
Paired with the fact that they think that the farmers and ranchers are doing well and making profit.
Yep. First thing I'd say, like even to tie back to the other threads early in this conversation, rural America, productive America is not your enemy. That angst being inserted between the cities and the rural economies, that is part of what's being weaponized to keep America weak. We are on the same side. We want a healthy, strong America again, the people to be healthy. I think the statistic I read the other day is 78% of Americans have a chronic disease. Like even most farmers live in food deserts now where they're not eating what they produce, they don't have access to healthy fruits and vegetables. They're mostly like living like a blue collar tradesman on junk food of fast food while they're out here working their asses off trying to keep their farm afloat economically, right? We need
They're only
healthy.
producing like one or two crops
Yeah.
that are just part of the same cycle.
Yeah, and there's layers and layers beyond this where the legislation and regulations keeps them from being able to run local food systems again because, like the local processor problem we were talking about, they keep trying to push food safety laws that probably make sense for somewhere doing 10,000 or 100,000 head of cattle a day on these processors that are doing 100 or 1,000 head a day. And it just doesn't make sense. These small local processors don't need $1 million in wastewater treatment. What they're doing with having like a septic system going out into a biological garden of like a seepage field that's being processed through plant cover crops and things is totally fine at that scale. But the legislation is being pushed by the lobbyists from the big business to keep the small guys down so that they don't get disrupted, to keep the profit up at the top of the big agribusiness. And those guys can play capital and finance games, cheap debt games, kind of play the Cantillon effect. For those who don't know, the Cantillon effect is this idea that those who are closest to the money printer benefit first from the printing of the money. That doesn't just mean money being printed and handed out, which it is through grants and things and subsidies, but also just access to cheap debt is an advantage of being close to the money printer where you can outcompete those who have higher capital costs, right? Because they're able to play the game economically where they're in the economy and market before inflation kicks in. So their cost of production is lower versus the other rest of the economy is having to do things at higher prices as the inflation trickles out, right? And so you've got legislation holding these guys down, you've got market effects holding these guys down. There's all these layers, right? But if we can band together, we can create enough viable scale to play those games. And those games aren't just like efficiency of scale of operations of a cow-calf operation. These are games of we've got big enough things happening to get taken seriously when we sit at the table and negotiate legislation processes, right? To compete against the lobby dollars being spent to keep us slaves to the systems. All these layers are things that if we're being selfish of just I'm going to get mine for my kids for the future rather than we need strong rural communities again, we can't win. Like my dad told me a story that really hit home for me years ago where he grew up first in North Dakota and then Washington State in a cropping family. And in their community, there was a family, one of the farming families had fallen on hard times. I don't remember the details. I don't know if somebody in the family, like the wife, had health issues and something happened where they kind of got caught behind the eight ball for a couple of years of crop cycles and things. And there was a year coming up where the weather was forecast with some bad storms during harvest season. The whole community locally, there's maybe half a dozen big farming families in this local community that They're the families that support the local schools, and their kids make up a lot of the local economy with just the different, like, small businesses and things happening. And all the farmers got together without even asking, talking about it, whatever, and harvested the crops of the struggling family to get them in the storage before they harvested their own. And I asked my dad, well, like, why? Like, why did they do this? Like, were they trying to, like, be nice? Was this charity? He's like, no, it wasn't. What they understood is there's only so many pillar families in a given rural community. And if that family failed, it takes a brick out of the foundation of the whole rural community. It takes a leading family out of the school system. It takes a leading family out of the business networks, right? And what my dad said my grandpa's mindset was, I can afford to have a bad year if the storms get me. They can't. And the local community can't afford that family to go under. Like, forget my own personal self-interest. My long-term self-interest is rooted in a vibrant local economy that works, a vibrant, strong church and school community of families that are flourishing, bringing energy and children into the world to keep it turning over and working, right? And what they understood was that the wealth long-term of all their families rises and falls on the tide of all the families being able to make it. We don't really have that as much anymore. We've been atomized. Like
I don't have that at all.
I was talking to my girlfriend the other day about identity politics and the rise we see of, like, the racism narrative and all these things, and the minority narratives and the sexism
You
narratives.
can trace it back to when they started doing that in 2011, 2012. Like, there's literally an actual graph you could see of that's when it started. Because that's what I was going to bring up too, is the fact that we live in an entirely different world now. Because I was going to ask, then how can we get back to that? Because again, in our history, we've never had a society that we know of like today, with our technology and how it's globalized,
Hmm.
and kind of how we literally have a supercomputer at our hands that that leads to this kind of break that we've had in this country. And then obviously recent events in America has only exacerbated all of that.
Do you remember what was happening when that started becoming a thing?
Yes.
The Occupy Wall Street. We had a unified movement across income brackets, across race, across all sets of American society that had accurately identified the problem. It's the financialization and Cantillon effect destroying the middle class in America, which the middle class is the backbone of a strong society. And they were starting to speak up about it. They couldn't let that get traction. They fractured that energy of the young generation waking up, leveraging identity politics to create this adversarial spirit where we start attacking each other. If we want to fix this, we have to stop attacking each other and start working together again. And this is one of the things I love about the Bitcoin community. The Bitcoin community is incredibly diverse because it's a group of people who have identified the root issue of our economy is not tied to reality anymore. It's a wizard in a room at the Federal Reserve. And the root issue of so many problems is that money is the coordination mechanism of a society. Like, I don't know if you've read that article I wrote, Soil and Money, where it talks about the history of soil and civilizations and maps it over American history, but then ties to it, like, the economic visions of it. I went through and I said there's three base technologies in a society. There's language. It's the ability to express and communicate desire to one another. I want this. I'm going to do this. There's fire, the ability to leverage energy to see desire accomplished. And then there's money. Money is a synthesis of language and fire. It's the ability in a distributed manner to communicate with each other about what you want and who is most effective at spending their energy in an economy to see it accomplished. And so when we have this soft money rooted in inflation and these subsidies and government interference, what ends up happening is the communication mechanism to coordinate activity in an economy breaks down. Because, like the cattle market, ranchers all around me of all these old guys have been selling out their herds the last couple of years. And all of them were telling me, like, look, the market's peaking, this mania is happening, I gotta sell out, I'll buy in when the prices come back down. And I kept telling all these old guys over and over again, like, look, like, are we measuring cattle market or are we measuring dollars? Because if you look at all the other hard assets and commodities, cocoa, orange juice, whatever, like, prices are up. They printed 3x the money supply in 4 years. And so the measuring stick is driving the markets to such a degree that price signaling is broken down, thus communication is broken down in the economy. And so without good communication, we can't have good coordination. And that's part of like the magic of our herd share system of uniting families together. And part of what I love about it too, we were talking about relationship, not just buying food, right? Like a lot of people are trying to buy from local farms. But we need to knit together long-term capital holdings to where we're not letting those long-term savings be weaponized against us of things we don't believe in, with your retirement account being stewarded by somebody who's against your own interests. We need to align time horizons with their own interests too, where like an average consumer, they want a steak for their barbecue, they think about it, they go to a store and they want it on the grill in 2 hours, right? Versus with our herd share program, we've got long-term capital and long time horizon alignment between producer and consumer where they're knit back together again as a tribe who cares about the same thing. And in doing so, those families now become ecological participants. Because what ends up happening, if we're allowing that miscommunication in the marketplace through bad money, through government over-interference, it causes fragility. Like you see this in the housing market, like if you watch The Big Short of what happened is you centralize risk higher and higher and higher again until it's existential for the whole economy versus allowing risk to stay on the ground, which is what we're terrible at as a society now. Like just the culture of bailouts and government can be a daddy and fix everything for everybody. Like the energy has to come from somewhere. Where does it come from? Well, the world reserve currency, we're robbing the middle class and robbing the whole world. Eventually that, like merry-go-round, that stops, right? So we have to create collaborative systems that exist outside of that miscommunicating context. So like with herd shares, the animal boarding program and the ownership of the holding of cattle as an asset, keeping all your value inside the local tribe. Part of the beauty of it is all the accounting is done in cows. We're measuring it in production of cattle. And so due to that, the communication mechanism is being knit back to reality again while it's breaking down in the rest of the world. Good systems of bringing families together to outcompete the chaos in the world need to be thinking this way. Of how do we create incentive alignment where we're sharing long-term energy of savings, long-term energy of our goals in life, long-term energy of what we're building towards with our just creative energy and willingness to work together on things, long time horizons of how we measure outcomes, where, like this is something I've said to the Maha movement where I've talked to some of the thought leaders in it, where there's not real political will to solve the root issues. Like you see this in a lot of the like conversations about national debt, right? Like so much of it's rooted in entitlement programs, it's rooted in paying for government debt, like overspending from the government is driving just more and more inflation. And the voter base just won't allow anybody to ever stop that gravy train. And because of it, the existential risk just keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher because there's no ability to stop it. One of my farmer buddies told me the other day, he's like, look, the next thing coming down the pipe is you're going to see this movement among the boomer generation that no matter what the cost of the world is, we are not going to allow housing prices to come down. We don't care if the young generation can't buy houses, protect our assets. And you're starting to see that where they did some surveys. I forget what the statistic is, but it's like 50 or 60 or 70% of them were like, look, at all costs, don't let housing prices come down. And if we continue to do this, we're centralizing risk. We're allowing the negative externalities to accumulate to the detriment of our children. And we can see this with the whole farming conversation. Through what we've done in farming, we have the negative externality of ecological destruction, soil fertility destruction, and health destruction of the American people. Like 78% of Americans have chronic diseases again, right? They seem distant. They seem like, okay, this is something that like, I don't have to pay this price. I could export it to somebody else. But eventually these things get big enough that we as a society can't anymore. The weight of it, of the negative externalities, the parasitic extraction, the passing the buck to somebody else, sinks the whole ship of all of us. So the problem of what we have to do as local tribes of family building collaborative systems, we have to be willing to swim against the incentives enough to internalize all those negative externalities again, to actually fix them locally. And that's expensive because now you have to survive in a basically non-productive economy while not passing the buck to somebody else. Because nobody's going to do this. Nobody's going to stop the gravy train of passing the pain up the chain to society as a whole until it just collapses. We have to be willing to look at this and say, like, we're getting close. The train has a set of broken tracks off the ravine with a bridge out in front of us, and nobody's going to hit the brakes. It's going to get faster and faster until it goes off. And I think people feel that. They feel it viscerally. And that's why you see so much energy on social media of like, restore America, like make America great again, make America healthy again, regenerative farming's the way, like all this excitement over we have to do this because people know. But we need people to put their money where their mouth is, put their heart and their energy where their mouth is, their time horizons where their mouth
Do you
is.
think they really know then? Because to me, if you know about I don't know, to me, if you know about it all and then you're just sitting there willingly on the sidelines, that's why I say, going back to like the whole influencer stuff and whatnot, is people think they know, but they only know layer 2 of layer 100 of this problem. And that's what I'm trying to get at is people are waking up and caring, but they still have no idea how bad this is. They have no idea how bad farmers and ranchers are getting decimated because they only see a little bit online. So that's what I continue to try to get at, is that it's the fact that people are caring, but not enough to actually do anything about it. And that in itself is very problematic because it goes back to we the people. To me, I don't see a way out unless this collapses or the people wake up and collectively help. I don't see any way out outside of that. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I'm really am trying to get at is I see people online care and do some supporting and whatnot, but then we just stop and then it still goes to the out of sight, out of mind. I'm going to go back to what I'm doing. I'm still helping a little bit in my head and I feel good inside, but it's still nowhere near as to where we need to be as a society.
Yeah, I think conversations like this are really important for a part of that because we need to understand the problem to be effective at solving the problem and not just have the emotion of feeling like we're solving the problem. Like part of the issue with social media culture is that people are celebrated simply for dreaming about things or talking about things rather than actually fixing things.
Well, I guess my problem is how can we even get people to sit down and listen? Because that to me is the biggest problem with all of this.
Yep.
Is that's why I see it online again. I see it online and in person constantly. It's people will learn a couple things and then tune out and then go back to the normal day things.
Yep.
But then everything that we're talking about and others are talking about that's really the problem's just so large. And so again, you learn a couple things and then you stop. So how can we get them to continue to learn, sit down with an open mind, open heart, open ears?
Yep.
Because to me right now, we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think what you're doing is a huge part of it. It's the willingness to sit down and ask the hard questions.
I'm still struggling to getting people to even care about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean,
or listening.
one of the values of, I guess I put it bluntly, truth, reality can't be denied. And this is where you see in the health movement or the farming regenerative movement or the homesteading movement where people end up with these chronic disease issues and they're just like, screw this, I'm not raising sick kids anymore. What the hell is going on and how do I fix this? Because eventually reality just comes knocking and it can't be denied anymore and it forces you to open your eyes back up again. Because we can build these Tower of Babels where we pretend that we're a god that can sway reality with this Keynesian economic system, that we're manipulating everything that happens through reductionist science, but ultimately it just doesn't work. We have to submit to truth again, submit to wisdom again, submit to the rules of nature and reality again.
And that's what I'm trying to get at to people is the only reason why I woke up is because I went through absolute hell. And it's still obviously there. And so I'm trying to get people to not have that as their breaking point. But it seems like for most of the population, it is that.
Yep. And then, I mean, you're doing it as well. We have to platform the people having the real conversations. And we need people who are honest enough and discerning enough to be able to do so, to get the voice out there so that those people who are waking up because reality hit and it hurts actually have access to real answers and actually have opportunities to engage and solve them. And That's back to like where I feel like what we're doing is really special. Is our model is unique in a way that enables families to join and participate to get at solving the root issues. And one of the problems here is that there's not many leaders right now in the country who have viable solutions. A lot of people pretend they do. A lot of people pretend they're out there winning. We need to be more honest as an industry. Like, are these big boys that we know that are writing books and on the speaking circuit? Like, there's a guy over in the like Southeast America region that everybody knows his name. He's probably doing 8 or 9 million a year in revenue. He's very vertically integrated. You've interviewed him. He basically is either break even or slightly losing money. He's on family land. He's had every advantage where he had a good start. He got to come in from an operation from the beginning where he had a leg up. Still not doing it, right? We can't do that OODA loop, iterative, fail forward, creative process of entrepreneurship unless we're allowing things to fail, not government backstopping and centralizing the risk higher and higher into the economy, and having honest conversations about it so that the young people can get really creative. There's so much energy in the young generation of people wanting to create real solutions. We just have to keep those people and their energy from getting sucked into non-viable approaches where we're actually working forward in that fail forward process on things that actually have real potential.
It seems like people are waking up, but still kind of in that I'm very tired, hazy, I need a cup of coffee, wake up, rather than I'm waking up and energized, ready to go. I don't even know if that's making any sense, but that just kind of feels like we're in this hazy, like that's just our society as a whole, we're in this just haze.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I mean, it is by design for a lot of reasons from what's happening. So I guess that's what I'm also trying to get at is there's just so much distractions by design. And I'm trying to parse through all of that for something that people have been so far removed from. Like it's two-layered problem. It's 0 to 1, but then also competing with all these forced distractions through online and in person. It's a wicked problem.
Like dopamine culture.
Yeah,
Right?
well, because that's why it's so hard with social media now. What I'm competing with, not like I know we just talked about the influencers. I'm competing against the algorithm, because Instagram, for example, it was working really well for me, and I was posting a lot, and people were actually seeing my stuff. And then they changed all of a sudden to more TikTokification, to where now on my personal Instagram, I unfollowed everybody that I've ever followed just to see what happens to my For You feed. It's crap. It's awful. It's
Yep.
just mindless stuff to just keep you addicted. And then that's changed how people also operate, because now this is just kind of a side tangent, but this is how I feel like where we're at is culturally. Now Instagram is full of couples Instagram, to where all I see is just making these videos. And I know for a fact behind closed doors that changes how your relationship is, because now instead of apps, like say we're sitting here and we're just enjoying life together. All of a sudden now it's what can we do to post online? What can we do to make videos to post online? And it's just completely changed our society as a whole. And now I'm just trying to revert that back in our food system. And it's just, yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but it's why this podcast is kind of transformed into more culturally just as much as the actual what's regenerative agriculture and the actual the meat and potatoes of agriculture, because those go hand in hand. And to me, if we want to change our food system, we have to change culturally too, kind of going back to thinking long term, revitalization of rural America. All of that to me works in tandem.
Have you ever read Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership?
No.
Really good book. Special Forces military guy. He does a lot of business consulting now.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. One of his things you hear him say a lot is discipline equals freedom. I'll weave back to that in a second. One of the things that's given me a lot of hope, we've been doing some local grazer get-togethers here in the northeast Oklahoma area. One of the guys here, his name's Dean Snyder. He's been in this part of Oklahoma for probably like 30 years. There's some state-level grazing organizations like Oklahoma Grasslands Coalition or whatever. They do regenerative events and events all over the state. One of the big things that always gets talked about is like, we need to be doing local get-togethers with just like county level people talking and like just meeting together regularly. And it's not really ever happened that much. And Dean finally one day was just like, man, I'm tired of this. So he just made a group chat, sent it out to all the good quality people he knew in this Northeast region. It was like, hey, hamburgers at my place this day, who's coming? And it was awesome. One of the things that shocked me, so I was in that group, the youngest rancher there. I've been ranching the least number of years. And I thought I was going to get a bunch of like friction from these guys of like, who are you? Like kind of belittling, not really taking me seriously. I was shocked. So we went around the table and everybody kind of told their stories, getting to know each other. In that meeting, I think I got asked more questions than any other rancher in the room. They were really excited. Like, my girlfriend was talking the other day to an uncle or somebody of one of her friends who's a rancher for years around here in this part of Oklahoma. And they were talking about me, and he's like, "Oh, I know of those guys. They're those Christian hippie farmers that do that like high density grazing thing."
Identity grazing thing, I love
The high
that.
density grazing thing, yeah. And it was hilarious. I mean, if the shoe fits, we walk around. I wear grounded moccasins, and I walk around shirtless. Like, definitely not your typical rancher, loving being out there in the sun. And it was really funny because when they were talking with him, they kind of pushed in a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, like I love the high density thing they're doing. I think it's really got a lot of potential, but it's just a lot of work." And what's really shocked me is the level of openness of the older generation. It's not near as adversarial as what you see on social media.
To me, I feel like though that's very, very contextual.
To a degree, yeah,
Because I've experienced both sides a lot,
mm-hmm,
like just as much. But that's why I want to push back to that because I know there's a lot of harp on that, but to me, there's also a lot of truth to that.
mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen the same thing with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, the Noble Institute. Like, I was sitting down with one of the leaders in the Noble Institute at a conference he was speaking at. We got lunch together during it. And he was like, "Man, I love what you're doing. I don't know how to teach it. Like, what you're doing there's an intensity to it and a skill required because it's like flying a plane really fast at low altitude. Like, your production's higher, your healing of pasture land's better, your like animal carry per acre's higher. But because of the skill required, I'm not sure how to onboard ranchers into doing it, even though we probably should be. The number of good conversations I've had has been really high. And it goes back to the whole algorithm thing. Like, I'm a fan of things like Noster or like private just group chats and getting our conversations off of the controlled platforms where there's incentives of TikTok's owned by foreign adversary. They control the algorithm. They control what you feel is happening in the world, right? Of getting those conversations grounded locally so that you actually are relational again. Getting back to this idea, relationality is a huge part of fixing these issues. Iron sharpened iron only happens if you're both present and being honest with each other. You got to both be in the room. And in a algorithm controlled world, you're not both in the room. You're both in a virtual room with the third party manipulator between the two of you.
It's why I argue that I believe the root of all of our problems is our disconnection from our food. Because talk about extreme ownership, everything you just described, we grew up being on the land, tilling the land, and being stewards of the land, but then you went through massive hardships. I mean, this is not even taking into account the whole hunter-gathering, but just once agriculture started and all the massive homesteading, you went through a lot of hardships, and you typically lost family members at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're also working the land at a very early age, so you're getting these manual labor skills, and that we've just really lost all of that. And then taking away the extreme ownership aspect, because that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say we live in a soy society, because we've offloaded...
In a what society?
Soy society.
Soy society. Yep.
No, soy society.
Soy society. Okay.
Not society. I believe we are in a soy society because...
like back to the idea of like yeast culture.
Well, I'm just kind of making fun because I'm a former vegan and I eat some soy, but I'm just anti that because it's kind of alluding to the whole soy boy.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to like offloading extreme owner, like we've offloaded all of our responsibilities, and that was very apparent during COVID too. And why I also see a lot of times on social media whenever like I make posts like alarming bells or something going on, a lot of people, what their first thing to do is tag RFK, tag Secretary of Ag, tag Trump, tag government, come save us. That's pretty much what it's saying, rather
Mm-hmm.
than thinking about, all right, what can we do together to help out this? And that's what we've
Yep.
really got to change, is having our responsibilities for us. It's our
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to take care of ourselves, our loved ones. If you want a future family, what that entails, like we've forgotten all of that. And to
Yep.
me, it's because of our disconnection from our food and the land. And like that's why I like the idea of going back to the locals and trying to build that together, because I in complete agreement. To me, that's a massive way to bring that back, and why I harp so much on shake the hand that feeds you, because
Mm-hmm.
it snowballs through that. Say you take your kids there, they might be the ones that are like, wow, this is incredible, and they want you to take you back there. And so I don't know, to me it just all paths lead back to that. To you have to get back on the land, talk to the farmers and ranchers, get your actual hands dirty, and then have some actual responsibilities for all of that, and for your food, rather than being mad at the government, being mad at the
Mm-hmm.
farmers, being mad at the grocery stores. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the nature of a culture that is centralizing risk higher and higher up in society. Of we always it's bailout culture. We expect somebody to fix it for us,
Yes, yes,
and it's a huge problem.
massive problem.
So like I would tweak that shake the hands that feed you. I would say build with the hands that feed you. You take responsibility over your duty. It's not just know them, it's not just relational. It's actually work with them to understand the problems and find your place in putting your energy of your life into building the outcomes.
I like that, but I guess why I'm mad, because I didn't. This is from AJ Richards. He was saying that, and I kind of just went with it because I love it. The reason why I say shake the hand is because people haven't even done that ever in their lives. Have
Yep.
never even met somebody like you ever. And so if you're wanting to, because I love the build, I totally agree with that. But for me, it's you have to first shake the hand and actually have a
Well, you got to
conversation.
beat them.
Yeah,
That's the starting line.
yeah.
But it's not the finish line.
No, it's definitely not at all.
It's where it begins.
Yes, it's the impetus.
Where
of all.
freedom starts happening is when you're actually building a better world together. I recently got published in the Epoch Times, or a response to me was published. I've been getting into more and more conversations with the thought leaders in the Maha movement, especially the farming side of things. Um, Once again, my girlfriend Erin kind of threw me in the deep end. She's a part of the Maha think tank on regenerative agriculture, and I saw go by her desk the draft that went into the current Maha report, and she showed it to me, and I was like, "This is just shit." And she was like, "Well, tell them." I'm like, "You want me to tell them that everything they're working on is useless?" She was like, "Yeah, they want to know the answers." I'm like, "I don't believe you, but I'll tell them the truth and we'll see what happens." So I passed around that draft to a bunch of my kind of philosopher farmer friends, or the guys that actually get it. And they were, majority of them were pretty pissed. They were like, for one, like, this is missing the forest for the trees. For two, like, these solutions are a fucking rounding error and doesn't help anything.
Is this whenever they just released on like the Make Children Healthy Again?
Yeah, and I think they did a pretty good job towing the line. But my conclusion of a lot of this, there's a lot of energy and excitement of people who want to fix things. But much like the government debt problem, there's no political will in our nation to actually solve the problem, because it's more about what we need to stop doing, not what we can add. But the only thing that people are willing to do is add things. There's no ability to stop it. This is part of the downfall of democracy. Like the founding fathers said, we've given you a democratic republic. Let's see if you can keep it, right? Like this government system only works for a just and moral populace, right? But what always happens in democratic societies, which we've gotten more and more democratic away from the original structures of kind of federalism, like just like in Athens, you eventually get to where the populace realizes they can just vote themselves subsidies, they can vote themselves just ease of life, and it just starts gutting the entire nation until there's just nothing left. And I have a lot of hope with the Maha movement because there's a lot of people who want to know the real answers. There's a lot of energy of people that care. But I don't think the government's going to fix this because I don't think there's any way to get the system to stop.
I think they are actively stopping the people trying to fix it too.
Correct. And that can get pretty nefarious at times in ways that people may not even believe it would happen. So,
Well, that's why I'm also that's why I'm glad I'm talking to you on like the whole optimism and all of that long term. I'm not gonna actually like go into it, but to me, there's just so much from the powers that be to where that's also why I'm so focused on trying to get it to the people, is because
Correct.
I literally see no way out outside of that. Not a single way out, because of
Hmm.
I believe it's all captured, and I don't think the government's ever going to change this unless the people wake up and put enough pressure, and that's it.
But the people who need to put pressure are those who are currently benefiting.
Well, I just meant the people as in that, just the population.
Correct, but the bulk of our population, back to the boomers not wanting housing prices to come down. They're not going to put pressure because their self-interest is so aligned with just continuing to extract.
Well, and it just seems like from there, it goes back to the out of sight, out of mind. People go to the grocery stores and they see foods that, so they still think everything's fine, even
That
though.
food may be making you sick, it may be killing your children, but like, yeah, there's food in the grocery store currently.
Yeah, but that goes back to the whole culture thing too, because now we've grown accustomed to, whenever you eat fast food, you're gonna just crash for 30 minutes, take a nap, and you're back to. It's like the whole Thanksgiving.
Until diabetes or cancer takes you out.
Yeah. Yeah. But that still doesn't even change people's percent. I mean that.
Because it's a slow roll.
Yeah.
The frog slowly boiling type problem, right?
Yeah.
So, I have a lot of hope looking at this, but I don't think daddy government's going to fix it because I don't think there's political will for anybody to say no and stop it.
Yep.
There's will to try to slap things on top of it and fix it, but in a way, like, this is where my accelerationist political stance kind of comes forth because, okay, let's throw energy at it, maybe help the grassroots people on the ground trying to solve it, but the more energy you throw at it coming from government money printing being what funds it, the faster you're speeding the train of government debt, the faster you're speeding the everything sovereign debt bubble, the quicker you have the train go off the rails, off the edge of the cliff, right? Like, all the things we're trying to do to fix it ultimately just make the root issues worse. And the only way around that is the localism. But, like, how do we do that? How do we effectively actually build enough local power? Like, this goes back to extreme ownership. It goes back to discipline and freedom. Like, back to, we were talking to some yesterday, I think, about, like, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is having an accurate long-term thesis of reality and adapting and surviving long enough until it comes true. And the hard part there, the number one thing that separates a good entrepreneur from a bad one, like creativity and like you talked about, like, you ever read Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki? Really good book for startups. He was an early guy in Apple, and then unlike a lot of businessy type books that are just a bunch of fluff, his are really packed with real wisdom of like school of hard knocks type stuff. One of his sayings is that you scatter a lot of seed and then you plant more of what's growing. He's got some other ones of like eat beans and bootstrap until you get there. It's like the survive until the long-term thesis comes true. The one thing that separates good entrepreneurs that make it from the rest of them is purely just persistence and stubbornness. Because it goes back to like with you, right? You've currently got health issues. You have it on your heart to be out here getting this message out there, starting to like help the consumer in the world understand so we can start together addressing the root problems. But buddy, it's fucking hard because you're having to discipline yourself to show up and be present when you absolutely fucking do not feel like it. And that right there is where the honor of the heart you're pouring in really is shining forth. It's the glory of what you're doing. It's the sacrifice to go create a world when you currently don't have the energy for it. Because all of us, 78% of Americans have chronic diseases now, right? Like, we have to do this while we don't feel like it. We have to do it while the local support structures for local economies are dead, or like finance markets, while none of it's in place, while the market for regenerative beef is not there, where like the commodity beef markets that try to suck everybody back into the like big feedlot paradigms, right? Like, we have to be willing to have the discipline to lean against that, even when it hurts. We have to do that together with enough cunning. Back to the cunning as serpents, innocent as doves type thing. Did you ever listen to the talk I gave at Mark Moss's conference, the Bitcoin conference, like a Bitcoin prepper thing down in Miami, Florida? Citadel Theory is what I titled it. It's like, how do you assert freedom in a world that's tyrannical and opposed to it? It was really good. It was like 40 minutes about how do you build real hopes that can shine in a world that's this dark, and how do you not get them trampled upon? And I went through like the different monopolies of power, the way we cunningly build resistance against them. Like, part of this whole thing is the structures that be are antagonistic to the world we want to have. And back to like the moral base of the middle class, so much of the good side of America, they want to be people that do things the right way and they follow the rules. And they're the people with good hearts that are also producers. But the space to do things in a way that matches what the rules currently say is just gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it goes with the longer you wait to say no, the heavier and heavier it gets to make the lift to actually change it. And we have to start realizing that we got to be willing to live in gray areas a little bit. And I won't push into that too hard, but you can't reverse monopoly power when the government's not breaking up monopolies. You can't reverse all this tyranny while still submitting and treating the authority that's over us as if it's legitimate. We got to realize that in America we've been granted this beautiful privilege of this federalist system of power and enforcement being rooted locally, and leverage the way that that works to build towards real solutions, even if it makes us kind of have to walk a fine line of what is right. Because legality and morality aren't the same thing. And allowing our nation to be destroyed, it may be the current legal path, just to sail on the train with everybody else, but it's not the moral one.
So then how have you, I guess this is a good segue into just the beginning of Smoke River Ranch and everything that you're doing here. How did you get this place started and really just, slowly building up this pretty much community aspect that you're really talking about? Can you just take the listeners through this?
Yeah, I can go through the story again. We went through some of it yesterday. Might as well include it here.
Well, that's why it's going to be separate.
Yep. So, young person, I got into regenerative agriculture, being passionate about it because of health issues.
Around what year?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I got sick when I went to college in 2009. I lost 20 pounds in the first 2 weeks. My little brother got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. He's 3 years younger than me at the age of 6, which is super young, basically unheard of.
Yep.
And the doctors wouldn't test him for it. My mom had to go in there and kick the doctor's ass to finally get the colonoscopy and get the diagnosis. They put him on immune suppressants, and he's kind of doing the mainstream medical route to this day. And typically if one sibling has it, it's like a 50-50% chance the other has it. And I didn't really show any major symptoms. I had some here and there, but I never really told my family because I didn't want to add stress to the family with how sick my little brother was. But it came out like a roaring lion when I went to college. And so I'd watched what had happened to my little brother. I went to the doctor at the college campus. They put me on drugs for irritable bowel stuff is where they started me. And the drugs, one, they made my health worse, and two, they made me suicidal. And I was just like, fuck this. Like, I've watched my brother do this. I'm not doing it the same way. And I dug in, I found Weston Price and like pasture-raised meats, wild-caught fish, like raw milk, home-fermented kefir, and was able to kind of leverage that to rebuild my health. And that story kind of made me fall in love with the people who are providing the food I needed to be healthy and whole again in the whole regenerative agriculture world. But like most young people, I dreamed I want to go do this one day, but I'm not going to be able to afford it. So I'm going to go work hard. Maybe one day when I'm 60, I'll have enough money to retire and subsidize a little hobby farm or something, right? And I had this beautiful story happen where my buddy and I, who's here, you'll meet him in the other like farm tour, where him and I were running a fencing company doing like fancy like wood privacy, black aluminum, vinyl fencing and stuff in the Hampton Roads area. And we were going out to Suffolk, Virginia to do a fence quote for a lady who had a recreational horse farm. The city had been mowing the ditches and mowed her fence down. She needed to get an insurance claim done for it. And while we were out there doing that quote, she was telling me that with recreational horses, she doesn't have her tax deduction for ag. She'd been trying to find farmers to lease to for a lot of the unused land. Everybody wanted to do cotton or soy, and they were spraying chemical over her land. She wasn't cool with it. She's like, I just wish I could find one of those young people who want to do that Joel Salatin regenerative grazing thing. Like, I'll give them a low-cost lease, and then they can just make their money on it and take care of the land for me, so I don't have to do, like, all the mowing and spend the fuel and the labor for doing it all. I was like, I'll do that, you know? And it was one of those moments where, like, you've ever had those times in your life where it's like, this is your future, and it kind of is just glowing, and you just know it, and it's like, if you don't go do this, you're missing out on, like, who you're made to be in the world.
That's how I feel about Regeneration, so yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I would say, like, I felt God in it, like I was called to this, and like, if I don't do this, like, I'm missing the track of my whole life.
You wouldn't be able to live with yourself.
Correct.
Because that's how yeah.
And so I signed that lease with her for 28 acres for $1 a year, which I knew was kind of below economically viable scale, but I had some hopes of ways I could get some other low-cost lease with her and some others. And I signed that lease when I was break-even net worth, had no money to buy cattle, no idea how I was going to buy cattle, but I'm just like, I'm in and I'm going to make a way, or I feel called to this and God's going to make it happen somehow. And so I had also joined Bitcoin Twitter in 2019 because I wanted to learn about Bitcoin, right? I'd seen some of the stuff happening with like civil asset forfeiture or like cash structuring things. Like I'd heard the story in the newspaper about a dairy that was selling milk locally, and they were depositing cash on a regular basis in like $8 to $12,000 sizes. And you know, like the bank reporting laws are all around like that 10 grand size. And so they got charged with cash structuring to avoid reporting. The whole thing was nonsense, but the government froze and held their bank account and basically put this dairy out of business because dairies are tight anyway right now with the problems in agriculture in America. And now their whole operating account got frozen. How do they survive? And so I'd seen some of these stories happening. I'd seen some of the early stuff with some of the debanking and conservatives coming down the pipe, and I was looking for answers. So I was starting to do some due diligence of like, is there anybody out there who has real solutions for this, for building productive local economy and businesses that's not going to get tyrannically just snatched from you. And so while I was doing my due diligence, I discovered Bitcoin. And I wanted to learn about it. 2019, there wasn't the amount of resources and books and articles that there are now. It's really grown out into the world a lot. All the people who knew about it were on Twitter, so I'd gotten active on Twitter. And while I was doing that, I was posting photos of and videos of me. I'm just out there putting in posts and stringing hot wire talking about this little ranch I'm going to start. And a wealthy Wall Street guy DM'd me. He's like, hey, this cattle thing you're doing. He was a Bitcoiner. I'd been interacting with him a whole bunch. Like, I went in on this thing you're doing. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I'm going to be doing regenerative grazing. I'm going to be doing it with heritage breed, early American piney wood cattle that are spotted and horned, and the mainstream sale barns hate them. Like, there's no money in this. I'm learning in the school hard knocks how to do this all. I don't want anybody being a part of this who, like, is in my hair, like, hurting my ability to learn and make decisions and figure things out to really jump this thing forward and, like, know what I'm doing. Like, there's no reason for you to want to be in this with me. And he wrote me back a letter, and this was 2019. This was before COVID. And he basically explained to me that, like, he's in the investment banking world. He was starting to foresee in their market research, the U.S. is starting to get onto war footing with China. He was concerned about how much of the animal inputs come out of China, whether you're talking like amino acids, supplements, medical stuff, whatever. And he's worried about food security for his family. He was also worried about things sneaking into supply chains, like mRNA vaccines or whatever. He also was worried about conservatives being debanked, like pretty aggressively, which we saw accelerate during COVID. So what he told me was like, look, I want two things. I want to get a lot of my assets out of the mainstream investment marketplaces into local relationships where they can't be rug pulled from me because of whatever nonsense. I want them to be secure to where I own hard assets that are real, that aren't dependent upon other things in supply chains, things coming out of China, whatever, that those assets are held where I have access to them and nobody can steal them. Like, I want personal self-sovereignty and freedom, which fits with a lot of the Bitcoiner ethos. And he's like, I also want food security for my family, not measured in caloric security, but measured in quality, to where I have 100% knowledge that my kids and family in the future are going to have what they need to flourish no matter what happens in the world. And I was like, okay, we're pretty well aligned. Like, let's put our heads together. Him and I came up with what we ended up calling the herd share program. He bought the original breeding stock, just like we're talking about earlier with the herd shares. Every year when the calves are weaned, we split the calves. I got the lion's share of the calves to fund operations. He gets some small yield. It's food security, and then we're replacing the breeding stock with younger stock in perpetuity. So he's got this secure holding of animals that he owns the legal title to, but they're delegated under my stewardship. I've got total captaincy and control of what's happening in the day-to-day. He can vote with his feet, because good relationships have to be liquid. You need to have the ability to cleanly enter and exit from either party, right? Otherwise, you're trapped. This is part of the problem with a lot of local attempts at small businesses among friends or family is you make this LLC. LLCs, by definition, with the way the ownerships work, they're kind of communal to where, like, you all have to be in perfect agreement at all times. If that breaks down, it blows up, right? With the herd share program, it was beautiful because if he's ever not in alignment, he can just take his animals and withdraw them. Now, it's built like a hedge fund to some degree where there's some gating rules where Like the meat stock can be withdrawn at whatever speed, but the breeding stock, he can only withdraw 25% of it every 6 months. So every 6 months we're doing a report on like, this is the amount of 1-year-old calves that are distributed out to the herd share owners. You request in 1 6-month period, I want to withdraw them in the next 6-month period. The farm satisfies that obligation the next 6-month period. So there's long time horizons that are agreed to up front. That way we're sharing a playing field that works, and there's an alignment that's happening to where it's slow enough for the farm to be able to solve the problems and rebuild breeding stock if somebody wants to exit, right? Okay, so, and then all the accounting is done in cows, not meat or dollars. Like the farm, if he wants to withdraw, he just gets to withdraw the animals. I get the animals to the sorting pen. Um, Explicitly, the thing is, like, once they're at the sorting pen, at my convenience, I've satisfied my contract. What I tell all the herd owners we have today is like, look, I take my trailer to this cattle auction barn or to like the butcher shop all the time. Just pay me to transport them there. I'll tell the butcher like, hey, half of this animal or this many of these animals are so and so's. He'll call you and pay for processing when it's and what cuts he wants when it's processed. Ship him the meat, right? And so we set up the herd shares, got the first cows in Virginia. COVID happens. Everybody starts getting concerned about asset security, about being debanked, about food security. Like the butcher shops get way backed up, and like the grocery store shelves are empty. And my phone starts blowing up. All his friends are calling me, or everybody on Twitter who'd seen what I was doing, like, hey, those herd share things, can I get some of those too? I was like, well, no, I don't have enough land, but yeah, we'll figure it out. Once again, entrepreneurship. It's like seeing the world clearly and finding a way to get there. So I did what a lot of people talked about doing during COVID. We got some friends together, bought some land out in Oklahoma, square mile of it, collaborative relationships. I had a friend out here, he's Native American, high net worth. He co-signed the loan for me because we believe in what's happening here. He believed in what's happening here. He gave me the opportunity to take a stab at making this work. When we signed the loan agreement for this property and kicked off the business, I brought 13 cows from Virginia with me. We had about 18 months of capital runway, not including buying cows or installing any infrastructure. I had one cattle trailer in my truck. I didn't have tractors. I didn't have like UTVs. I had one UTV. Didn't have like hay trailers. Didn't have like enough like waterers, any of the stuff you would need, right? Um, didn't have any electric fencing in, so this is a standard set stock commercial operation. But we knew we had appetite for herd shares because of all the phone calls we were getting about it. So we took the risk as entrepreneurs. We launched it. I went and started hitting the phone tree of all the people who'd been calling me asking for them. Hit the podcast circuit talking about the project. And it was real. There's enough people willing to become participants in tribes of families solving this problem together, where the value of this was something they wanted. And I told some farmers about it while we were doing it. They're like, man, like you're taking advantage of these people. Like this deal's too good for you. And I'm like, these herd owners feel the opposite. They feel like this is the best thing that's ever happened. We're like, can we do more of these? And that's good business, where you're creating a world where both people feel like they're winning so much. It's like, how is this possible? That's real entrepreneurship. You've solved a real problem to create a world of an infinite sum game occurring where more value is being created because both parties are winning so big, right? So we did more herd shares. I started them out at $3,500 per herd share, which is basically the meat value of a grass genetics cow with USDA grass-fed beef prices. Kind of the floor price of it was just like, this is the meat value of an animal. You own the animal. If you ever want to exit, you could just butcher your animals and go and have meat in the freezer, right? And we'd go out, we'd buy undervalued cows in the market of this heritage breed, hardy breeding stock to build the zombie apocalypse breed we're building. We started with Piney Woods, bought out most of the Piney Wood conservation breeders, ended up scaling into Corriente and trying a bunch of other different genetics. The Piney Woods definitely proved to be the best. And
Why? What in particular about them that was so great with the genetics?
heat tolerant, parasite resistant, can handle the intensity of the grazing system, a true regenerative grazing, ability to backwalk to water. Like they just handle the pressure way better and everything else while maintaining like health and fertility. So we grew by about 150 to 200 head 3 years in a row, just going out every fall buying animals from some of these conservation farms of like Corriente or Piney Woods. Did $1.5 million in herd shares in 3 years. stewarding those animals and growing more families participating with us along the way. And so between February of 2022, when we launched this operation, to today, we grew from 13 cows to we're over 500 head now if you count calves. So you look at ranches in the U.S., 89% are less than 100, 10% are between 100 and 500, and 1% are over 500. If you're talking animal units, we're probably 380, 400. So we're not quite there as far as mama size a cow calf in the operation, but we're getting real close to where Jaime says like 500 head is the viable size, which once again, how does the young generation get there? Like we basically through the co-signing of the loan with the collaborative partner through the herd share operations, conglomerated about $5 million worth of assets in this handful of years. Like, that's hard to do to get up and get going. But it was the willingness of a group of families to work together that did it. And the willingness of me and my team to raise the banner as leaders, say, this is the vision, and we have the will to see it brought forth. And part of the reason those families were willing to take the risk on us was, one, they wanted viable solutions. They didn't see many options in the world for that besides our vision. And two, they had the underlying security. They own the cattle. If it ever doesn't work, they can just take their cows and go. Willingness to offer real freedom in relationship. And we made a really big point that this is more than just a legal agreement. We view this operation as an honor commitment, where we as young men leading this are going to do this or die trying. That we're going to do whatever it takes to find a way to make this work for your families, to provide this security of food and like management of your animals for you. And my team lived that out. I mean, my core guys, we have not paid ourselves. We lived in the barn, still living in the barn, for over 3 years, where we've been putting in 70, 80 hours a week on average, each of us, working our asses off to get here. And we knew that going in. Once again, discipline equals freedom. Entrepreneurship success is rooted in just persistence and stubbornness, right? To get over the hardship and figure out how to make a way. Like another saying that my mentor says, so there's a couple of them that are relevant here. One is you go to war with the weapons you have. Like whenever possible, get better weapons, but if you're going to pick a fight, you got to just go. The other is miracles take a lot of hard work because you have to hold open the space until the answers arrive. And the stubbornness and faithfulness of my core team, I couldn't have done this without those guys. Like, it's been a wild story where I'm really humbled and grateful because my success at what I feel like is my calling in life has been dependent upon other people to build it with me and their willingness to suffer and be stubborn with me. Real value is always created out of suffering. It's the willingness to see something that matters in the world and go out and find a way to get it done, right? And so the herd share owners knew that, like, this group of young guys, that we're the character of the kind of young citizens, the young frontiersmen, the pioneers that made America great. Like, we're the current generation of guys who carry that spirit, that rebellion of we're going to go west and through the sweat of our brow and working together in humility of doing it, relying on each other, find a way to make this happen. And they were willing to take the risk of trusting in that. And it worked. We, in that handful of years, became one of the leading ultra-high-density grazing operations in the nation. Speaking at conferences, educating, we've run one of the largest Facebook groups on ultra-high-density grazing, which is just the bleeding edge of grazing science. We're working now, like, with a tech company to develop grazing technologies to make this accessible for other farmers to where they don't have to suffer the hardships we did at getting here. Trying to build the, like...
Hardships like what?
Oh, man. Like the conversation with the Noble Institute we were talking about earlier. The big problem with ultra-high-density grazing.
Well, first, can you explain ultra-high-density grazing?
Yeah, so ultra-high-density grazing, we are replicating what the bison did in the Great Plains historically, or the wild herds or ruminants. Large herds of animals packed really tightly, grazing intensively and non-selectively, meaning eating everything, rotating with long rest periods for full life cycle of the plants to happen, where root exudate production, building deep carbon stores in the soil is occurring, and full diversity and succession of species to happen, come back, do it again. Like a lot of people in the regenerative world are doing kind of really light rotational grazing.
Well, that's why I asked you, because we typically hear daily rotational grazing, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, or like the take half, leave half type model. The problem with that, a cow doesn't know how to graze at an even height. She's not a lawnmower. So what they'll do is they'll come in, they'll graze everything of the favorite high palatable good grasses and leave the stuff they don't like. And you have some advancement because of rest that's better than set stocking. It's not instant desertification. But the land doesn't go through full succession of species for full maximization production. It eventually stagnates at some kind of low to moderate level of monoculture, especially this part of the country because the Kentucky 31 fescue becomes dominant, which is a toxic grass, hurts animal performance. It's kind of bitter but super hardy, so the cows don't graze it very hard. Um, and so, like, this is where these guys are doing those systems, and it looks sort of useful. Like Greg Judy, I'll throw his name out there because he's so well known. Um, he runs like 200 to 300 head on 1,600 acres of mostly low or zero cost leases. And a lot of flack gets thrown at him from mainstream ranchers because, like, you can't do regenerative agriculture at scale to feed the nation if you do it your way. Like, well, yeah, those mainstream ranchers are correct. That he's on some of the best ground in the world with really low land cost, grazing at really low animal carry rates, which is not economically viable for any other person who doesn't have his advantages. Advantages of marketing animals at a really premium price point, the animals that arguably aren't genetically good enough to deserve it, and having just this really low cost to carry with the land input cost, right? What makes ultra identity special is that we can carry 3 to 4 times the number of cows per acre of most normal grazing operations while building fertility in the soil, pushing succession of species and biological diversity forward. And like Johan says it well, a cow has a dual purpose. She's the keystone species of ecological management and the production and flow of food from the marketplace, right? Like goes back to my definition of regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is the maximization of photosynthetic energy capture while balancing the stocks of capital of future fertility, resilience, ecological diversity in the system, and nutrient density and health for the community with the flows of production of cash rooted in food being provided to the market, right? So with ultra high density, it's really magic because we're able to outperform and be more productive and thus efficient and profitable than other operations while actually building fertility and ecology and health for the community rather than extracting and actually pushing out the negative externalities into the larger world like we were talking about earlier, right? Whether that's using chemical that or low nutrient product of food that's bad for the people consuming it or ecological extraction. Okay, so ultra high density there is really important for enabling young ranchers in America to actually be able to be financially viable and solve the root issues of health and ecology, right?
So before, because I know that goes in tandem with what you're working on, education. What are some of the problems that you faced doing
Yeah.
this?
So circling back to that,
Okay.
like the conversation with the Noble Institute, he wants to teach this. He wants to have other ranchers be able to do this because he sees the value in it. Or like the conversation with the local guy, those hippie Christian farmers doing this high density thing. It's so cool, but it's a lot of work and I can't do it. The problem is it's like we were saying, he was saying, it's like flying really fast with the intensity of management, where it's like flying a fighter jet at high altitude. You make one mistake, like if you're not flying with a fly-by-wire system like fighter jets have, you just a breeze of wind, you hit the mountainside, right? What the issue is that you have to be really good at it. You got to know your animals. You got to understand room and fill. You got to understand like utilization and palatability and fertility, or like not fertility, quality of forage, what the animals can gain weight on. You got to be really quick to recognize data trends of like body condition trends. Most people that try ultra high density, what ends up happening is they don't have a good enough genetic base of animals to handle it. Most of the like regenerative cattle you see in the U.S., which are definitely way better than commodity cows that you're feeding a lot of like grain inputs to or medical care to keep them productive. You've got work that's been done like the South Pole or like the Faro Angus. They're much, much better. But you put even those cows in a high density system like what we're doing, those cows typically struggle so much because of the pressure we're putting on them with the high utilization grazing, because there's tension, right? The harder you graze, the better it is for the ecology and the land, but the harder it is on the performance of the animal. So you're constantly balancing animal performance with advancement of land healing. And so I always tell people the magnitude of difference between like a commercial set stock cow and like a typical what we call grass animal like a Fairlangus or a South Pole is basically the same magnitude of difference again of a ultra high density genetics capable animal. And so these people have genetic bases that aren't really good enough for doing this. They push their animals trying to move into learning how to do it this way. The animals struggle. They slide in body condition. They're not quick enough to adapt to that. And then they get poor breed back. And so many ranches are running on debt. They got debt on next year's calf crop. If you get poor breed back, where you get 30-40% calf rate rather than 85, now they don't have enough calves, they can't pay for the debt, and boom, they're out of business, right? And so there's all these layers that make ultra high density hard. Part of it's the skill barrier, part of it's the lack of genetics capable of doing it, especially true in the fescue belt, which is a big part of cow calf country from like where we're at in Oklahoma all the way over to like Carolina in this kind of latitude bandwidth of the country is that fescue grass, which is really hard on cattle. Um, so we've been working on trying to forerun providing things that solve these problems, make it easier for the people that follow in our footsteps. Whether that's the genetics development program, happening to those cows you can see out behind me, or like working with this technology company where we're building basically a sensor suite that you can run out with the animals. And it's measuring animal rumen fill for how much they've been eating, right? So depending on how full the rumens are, you can gauge how hard have I pushed the animals to get utilization and thus efficiency at graze, but also helping heal the land. Measuring that, measuring palatability, utilization kind of metrics across each section they graze on to kind of know what the sweet spot is for healing the land and leaping succession of species forward. And then also tracking body condition trends. And we're going to build like a AI-driven dashboard that correlates all that data together with really quick trend recognition so you can see right where that sweet spot is of how hard of pushing these animals is good enough to heal the land, but how hard is too hard that I've sacrificed animal performance. And then stack into that some education for like while you're developing genetics for your given property, like how do I supplement them to kind of find that sweet spot if necessary or whatever. And so allowing people to have access to our bull genetics we build to kind of get that calf of the next generation calf crop capable of grazing this way, tools that help them have the skill to bring to bear to be able to do it. And then we're also working to bring to that the scale needs of like our financial vehicles and systems we're building. Whether that's like we're working right now with the herd share model. I've tried to open source it a lot to help other farmers do it. It's not worked really well. It's simple from the consumer standpoint, but from the farmer standpoint, it's complex to operate.
For sure.
Yeah, because you got to wear a lot of hats. I'm like an accountant doing really accurate data tracking. We've had to build software systems. Like I'm a community manager. I'm like a hedge fund cash flow manager. I'm a marketer. I'm a farmer. I'm a geneticist. Like a soil scientist. Like most regenerative farmers struggle because you got to be a farmer and a marketer. I'm like that times 10. We're going to end up building like a school and like a 3-year internship program to bring in quality people to teach them the system, and then hopefully leverage our network of financiers, supporters, whatever, to be like, hey, this guy's now qualified to do this. Help launch him to go do it in this other part of the country, right? In order to get there, we're going to build this kind of hub and spoke model starting locally here in Oklahoma to where we've already got the scale and we're growing even better or faster here with this cow-calf operation. And we'd love more herd share owners to keep growing this. I'd like to get up to 2,000 to 3,000 head. Um, Look up my website, smokeriverranch.com, and go to the herd share page if you want to be a part of it with us. But where we take the long time horizons we're capable of having because of the scale of community backing and the long time horizons we have, to where, like when I was speaking at the Acres Conference here in Oklahoma, there's a ton of families there that are trying to ranch. A lot of them had family land, anywhere 125, 250, some of them even like 1,200 or 1,800 acres. They're like, look, I'd love to do this, but I don't have money for cattle. I have like 20 head running on this and I can't make it worth my time. And a lot of them are telling me I've tried to do custom grazing, which is the standard way a lot of ranchers do this, where somebody else owns the cows, you as a rancher charge them a per head per day fee, and then you're running a ranch for somebody else, and then you can use that to kind of scale in, add in your own animals, and you kind of grow a business over time. The problem is that most of these opportunities of doing custom grazing, that if you try to put the animals in a real regenerative system for healing your land, the animals just fall apart. And so there's tension in the incentives where the owners of the cows don't like these landowners and grazers using these custom grazed animals for doing these kinds of grazing. And they're like, I've tried it, it hasn't worked. Like, how do I overcome this? The bank's not willing to give me a loan for non-Angus type cattle, which are the type of cattle I need. It's like, okay, like, look, like, let's be collaborative. Back to the idea of, in order for agriculture to be economic, it must be ecological, but rooted in long enough time horizons and real value production enabled through collaborative relationships. Like, let's just talk about it. You need cattle. I've got a large cow-calf operation. I'm spitting out really quality steers every year. I could focus on being the mama herd through these herd share backers. I could sell you the steers when they wean. They're like, well, what are you going to sell them for? Okay, I can't afford that with enough numbers to make it work. I was like, okay, what if I gave you the steers on consignment? We could set up a deal where, like, either when the animals sell, we split it, and I, as the cow-calf operator, get a certain split of the retail dollar, or we could just lock in on a contract that, like, when you sell them, you pay me X amount of money. I'll carry the time horizon risk. And these ranchers are like, you would do this for me? Everybody's always trying to take advantage of me and rape me. Like, this would be everything. Like, yeah, I'd do that for you. Like, it makes the pie of local economic activity larger for the good of all of us. I don't have to pinch every penny to try to win. If I play a larger game, even if you're making more, I win better. Like, I'd rather play an infinite sum game and do it that way. And so, like, the more herd share backing we have to do the cow-calf at scale, the more I can support local, what I would call spokes of this hub and spoke model. And then the goal is that as I build out with other ranchers finishing steers, which is really the easy part, you're not having to deal with calving, you're not having to deal with genetics development, you've got really easy keeping quality cattle already. You're just marketing beef into your local community and running the animals. I could find the ones that are the best and pull them into the internship program, right? And so we're trying to build this comprehensive stack that we figure out all these kind of keystone problems, and we, through our stubbornness, take it on the chin solving the problem to give people the opportunity to go out there and do it with us.
Then how to kind of going with the fact that maybe there's a lot of people out there that are teaching. How do you convince people that what you're doing is the way that they should be doing it, rather than, you know, kind of what you were critiquing on as the industry as a whole, to where a lot of people that are teaching or educating might not be doing it themselves or barely
Mm-hmm.
making it.
I think it's just as simple as the truth wins of having a real answer, and success speaks for itself.
Yep.
Because we're out here doing this when all the other young people are failing, and we're actually winning. And people want to be a part of that because they don't want to fail. And those who have enough real understanding of the problems, or discernment, wisdom, whatever you want to call it, they see the structural issues in the industry. Like the current way the beef market works. I've had a lot of conversations with some of these big, like, regenerative certification institutes that are trying to build regenerative supply chains, like Regenerative. The problem is that we have to build the logistics of regenerative supply chains different than the way commodity supply chains work. Like, the way I told Regenerative this was that the only reason national scale cattle markets work, in that we can treat cows as fungible, meaning like a cow is a cow and we can just drop a cow anywhere and we can do what we're doing, because of the current cattle markets. You've got all these small ranches, you've got beef on dairy, you've got imported cows. They are going into the cattle trading market that basically they're subsidizing that. And then those cattle traders are making money just basically, like, once again, financial games. Like, that's how everybody makes money. Those go into the feedlots, which are huge, and then the feedlots are playing large-scale financial games and then leveraging their scale and their cheap debt to go into the big, giant mega processors to get the beef on the grocery store shelves, right? The only reason that's working, with cows being fungible, a cow being a cow can be a cow anywhere in the country, is because we're leveraging medical and high-energy grain feed inputs to overcome the fact that cow's not locally environmentally adapted. If we want regenerative supply chains of nutrient-dense food, you have to take ecological local adaptation into context. Because when you take away the medical inputs, you take away the high energy feed inputs, you can't take a cow from out in Nebraska or the high desert plains of Colorado and bring it to northeast Oklahoma and finish it at density on fescue. The cow's going to forget gain weight. It'll probably lose weight and melt, and it'll take 12 to 18 months to get used to the forage base here and build back out to be finishable, right? So logistics in a regenerative supply chain need to kind of inverse where the size is. You need large local hubs of genetic building of cow-calf operations going in a radius to these local spokes that are doing backgrounding to raise the animals up to full age and then finishing, and then marketing them to their local customers, rather than small farms going to large finishing operations of feedlots, right? So scale at the front end and get smaller at the hubs. They're doing the relationships with the local community to get out into their local marketplace. And so as we scale this and scale the help from everybody listening to this who may want to be a part of it with us with the herd share system and then build the hub and spoke model, we're going to build an entire network around us of regenerative supply chains of ranches that are actually making money and working, and healthy consumers using this high nutrient dense product in a way that's not working with a lot of these different models that aren't taking into account the logistics flip of true regenerative systems. So I think what's happening, we're already seeing this, but I think what's going to continue to happen is success just speaks for itself, and people want to be a part of it because they want to win too.
So, just on the topic of regenerative agriculture, then, why are you such a big proponent of it?
I think restoring rural vitalism in the middle class of America is the foundational problem of making America strong again. And that starts with a nation rises or falls with its soil. Agriculture, manufacturing, strong middle class, economic activity, everything else grows out from that. We can't have a strong nation without strong, vital rural communities. And growing food with profitable production is the foundation of that. And so regenerative agriculture is that keystone of undoing the extraction, the soil loss, the erosion, the biological diversity loss, of reinvigorating that breadbasket, quote unquote, that food production capacity of our nation in order to get economic activity happening in rural America again. Because the farm is basically supposed to be like this keystone of local rural vitalism of economic energy. Like our operation, right? Like we're running a bunch of UTVs. We got a tractor. We got trucks. Trailers and things moving around. So it's like now I need a mechanic, and then that mechanic can help fix things for other people, and like other things start spinning up around it because it's just this kicking the flywheel over of local energy. And it's energy coming from the sun that's coming down free to us every day onto the land, that through effectively capturing that is just pumping energy into our communities again. And that energy is just the source of rural economic vitalism.
Do you think that regenerative agriculture is possible? Because for you, you're running cattle, but say for folks that want to actually grow produce, and talking from like an economic standpoint and all of that, do you believe that that's possible?
I do. I actually had this conversation with the Weaver family last night. They're running for lieutenant governor. He's running for lieutenant governor in Oklahoma in the next election cycle. And he asked me a lot of these questions because so much of the voter base in Oklahoma is agriculture. And we were talking about the different types of agriculture. You got the cropping world, the cattle world, you got the market garden, the produce world. They're all struggling for the big picture, very similar reasons. The young generation being priced out, the lack of rural labor, the brain drain of rural communities, them leaving to go join the cities to join the financial economy. But each one of them kind of has their own flavor of the key things that need solving to make it work. When it comes to produce, labor is one of the big problems. But the other one is that it's basically a two-tier market. You've got like Whole Foods, Sprouts, natural grocers selling nutrient-dense, regenerative quality product for good, healthy people. And then you've got the commodity supply chains of lower nutrient-dense product that have probably negative health outcomes because of chemical residue and things, right? And we have to see that to where it's impossible to compete with like Cisco, like these commodity food supply chains. Because these global supply chains of these massive agribusinesses are so subsidized that the local farming economy is never going to outcompete it. But if we focus on the top tier, the nutrient density, especially with produce, because your average fruit and vegetable, I've read, loses 10% of its nutrients every single day between picking and getting to the consumer. Your average fruit and vegetable you buy at the grocery store is already 2 weeks old. It's basically empty, right? So there's this huge advantage if you're focused on the top tier of nutrient dense products. There's so many people now that care about that for their own health, that because you're local, you can get to them faster. That you have this huge competitive advantage over these global supply chains versus trying to compete on price. So the issue is there's really two, and it's pretty simple. One is we need market coordination. That's why, like we were talking earlier about Kat, with her Robinson's Ranch doing the vegetables that she's selling to Fresh RX. Fresh RX, being this consistent institutional type buyer, has given her consistent demand of quality product that's enabled her to build her operation. The problem for a lot of these young people trying to do market gardens is they have no consistent forward predictive demand. And back to the short time horizons, right? We need some sort of market coordinating function happening where we can build maybe just local software systems where like restaurants can say like, hey, I'm going to need this many pounds of X weekly during these seasons, and then farmers can sign up for producing it in some sort of incentive model that makes it work, right? So that the consumer is sharing time horizons with the producer, just like once again with our herd shroners for the beef cattle. If we can institute coordination, now we can also institute not just long time horizons of production where you're not having a lot of waste at the local farm level because that waste eats them alive. Market gardens have a fixed cost structure where it's all labor based, and all their profits made on the margin of making sure they move their product without wasting much of it. If we can do that coordination with a just in time, a JIT system, that is moving that food into the consumer market, whether it's retail, like local establishments that are doing nutrient dense food, or restaurants, or CSA boxes, that is a huge, huge multiplier of profitability for those operations. The other problem is the misinformation in the marketplace, which this is huge, and we keep coming back to it in every different angle of this conversation. There's a group in Oklahoma, I won't name them, that is selling 1,500 CSA boxes in this northeast Oklahoma region. I think it's northeast. Um, I think it's per week. I might be on the wrong unit of time there. I think it's per week. Um, they're advertising it as nutrient dense local food. They're not. They're buying it from commodity production of the big local, like the big, like just supply chains, not Cisco. It's from like a different supplier. And all these people who are spending this premium dollar thinking they're supporting local Oklahoma economic activity, local Oklahoma farmers, that they're getting fresh, nutrient dense produce for the health of their families, they're not getting it. We need to bring honesty back in the marketplace again. Part of that is we need to push forward the science of nutrient testing. We need to bring almost like medical grade standards of this food has X level of these vitamins and these phytonutrients compared to this food, so there's differentiation. And we need to figure out not just like how to get the cost of the test down to make that accessible, but like so much of nutrient science is actually totally an unknown right now. Like HRI is a lab run by John Fagan. He was doing some studies on wheat recently, and he's doing really cool work. So he was doing a test that they did mass spectroscopy in a unconstrained manner, that they weren't looking for particular compounds. They were looking at everything that was in the food. And then they ran it through AI to kind of look, okay, all these compounds by their mass weights or chemical structures, what's actually out there that has papers written about it. And he found all these medicinal compounds in wheat. He was telling me about it. I was like, dude, that's on my supplement shelf. I didn't know that's in wheat. And he's like, well, it's not in all wheat. The commodity wheat we tested didn't have it. The regenerative wheat we tested did. And what he discovered is that what we know about the nutrients in wheat I think it was less than 10 or 20% of it, of what he actually discovered by volume of nutrients that actually are in the wheat. And the biggest differentiators between commodity wheat and regenerative quality wheat were all things that are not being tested for in nutrient science. So we need to actually start looking for what are the real compounds, the medicinal compounds in food that heal people. We need to be measuring those so people know what's there and having honesty in the market. And then we need some sort of like neighborhood watch or like trusted private market verification where it's like this person says this is coming from here and that is actually true.
Yeah.
So that we don't have demand getting short circuited off from the real local economy into places where people think they're spending on dollars getting something else for it than what they're actually getting.
Yeah, because the major problem with that too is, for a lot of those people, if they do find out the truth, who knows if they ever try to find another farmer or something to actually support rather than just going to the grocery store, and then that just continues the problem that we have. But that's why I brought up produce. It's even from my trip and just finding farm maps and whatnot. Finding local produce is very hard, and most places we visit, like ranches or farms, they typically have their own little garden to grow for just their family.
Yep.
Because of this, and it's very very challenging because the labor part is massive. The farm I worked on was 250 acres. They ran lamb, pigs, chickens, turkeys, cows, rabbits, and then more produce than I can ever think of. And the amount of labor needed for all that is very high.
Yep.
Even just from the production side of it all. But the I guess the positive is that was the best produce I've ever had. It was grown the right way.
Yep.
I got to eat it literally right as I picked it. Incredible. But how can we get people to get to that point? That's why I wanted to bring that up. It's it's a big problem too.
Yeah, I've actually got a meeting Tuesday with some software people where I'm going to sit down with Aaron with FreshRx and the software people to see if we can build some market coordination capability for this Northeast Oklahoma grower region, and then hopefully leverage FreshRx to build this logistics hub that makes availability of this high quality, locally grown, regenerative produce available to this region. I'm really excited to see what's going to be possible as I'm taking these kind of economic, big picture, attack the root issue type mindsets into other parts of the food system here in Northeast Oklahoma.
I love that. So just on continuing the topic of regenerative agriculture, this could be more so conversation towards, the actual producers. Because a lot of ranchers that aren't doing regenerative and they see all of just regenerative world and, how much this is picking up online. Majority I see do not believe in it at all, really, and don't see it as this viable path. They don't see it. They just see it as like wishful thinking or really anything. How do you address this whenever talking to just any farmers and ranchers that aren't doing it the regenerative way? They've never really tried it, because I know, to me, there seems to be a lot of pushback on that side of things.
Yeah, usually the way I address it is I address the fact that in most cases they're right. Most regenerative systems you see are mostly LARP. Like that's just saying they're doing something and not really doing it, or they're doing it at a level of production that is so low that it's not useful for what would happen in a large context as far as agriculture. But just because most of what you're seeing is not useful or real doesn't mean that it's not possible to do so that way. Regenerative grazing, regenerative cropping, like doing John Kemp style, like biological soil amendments and foliar sprays to feed the soil to get the crops to leap forward to where they're existing at a higher level of plant health to build the soil quickly. These things can be done where it either takes time or it takes capital, to where you restore the soil and then your level of inputs is lower than a mainstream system, your level of production is higher while building your property and your resilience and fertility for the future. You just have to have enough understanding to know how to do it. And the time horizons or capital to get to that return point, which is typically, if you're waiting on time in a grazing operation, 4 to 6 years. I don't know cropping as well. If you have the capital to put in to do like the actual like compost teas or soil amendments or carbon inputs of like what Salatin did of bringing in cheap carbon to break down the soil to build the soil quickly, you can do it a heck of a lot faster. I mean, I've seen like Elaine Ingham or John Kemp talk about building rich tilth in like 2 to 3 growing seasons. It is totally possible to produce more than a commodity system, producing higher quality food, and do so with lower input costs for the long haul. But the number of people doing that is currently abysmally small. The number of, like we've just been talking about, like misinformation or just poor thought leadership in the market is a really big problem. And this is one of the big reasons because we're not getting mainstream adoption because those people know enough to know what they're hearing is not actually real. But I would just caution those people to not throw the baby out of the bathwater of assuming just because they have discernment to know that 80% of it is nonsense, to assume that all of it is.
I like that. And I guess with the capital aspect too, because you were mentioning how through Twitter that guy reached out to you. How can we go about that moving forward? Because one thing I see this with the whole tech world, there's just so much money in that world, and then they bring over their finances to this, and like the whole lab growing meat and indoor farming and just all these other solutions. They come at it because from a tech lens focus and think that they're just God in a lot of ways, but they don't understand the fundamentals whatsoever. They don't understand farming at all. How can we avoid that and kind of hit the model that you're going with? Because there's so many people out there that have a lot of money that might want to do something like this, but A, they might not know the people like you, or B, the inverse of a farmer and rancher is looking for these people, but they're finding the wrong people, and then that can get messy so fast to where they don't see the return immediately. You're like, what are we doing? Because I don't know. I just hope that moving forward, there's this blend together. The folks that have a lot of money that might not want to actually farm themselves and find people like you to where we can just continue, because it is capital intensive,
Mm-hmm.
very capital intensive. I don't know if if that was a straightforward question or not.
Well, there are some key people in the world working on these things. Like I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a guy who was a pretty big name inside of the FSA world, had a pretty high up title. He left a really cushy job because he had a realization. The realization was they're constantly working on restructuring bankrupt farms. And when they restructure it to offer like a bankruptcy reset type situation where somebody buys it out, like the assets are still there. What he realized was if the farms had been paying basically like 8% returns, none of these farms to the investors, to the debt markets, none of these farms actually would have gone bankrupt. If they had had long enough time horizons to stabilize the farms through the market cycles, like the cow market cycle is typically 8 to 12 years. I don't know what the crop market cycles are. And he realized that because farms were getting stuck with short-term debt, they weren't able to weather the ups and downs to actually match their long-term like financials to the actual market they're operating in. And so he took a pay cut to go build a new initiative where what they're working on is taking in private money at an 8% return, but structured with long time horizons around market cycles for farmers to make money available for these kinds of things again. There's a lot of people out there thinking about this type of stuff, and they're people in the right sorts of places. They're rare. There's not a lot of them, but there are people trying to do this. The thing I would caution is that as we on the ground try to build this, don't try to compete with the financial returns of the hyper financial meme coin vaporware economy. Try to partner with locals who care about value in the same way we do of healthy local communities and resilience and security. The returns of what we're trying to create where there's these massive edges and we're building things that nobody values for the dollar, the intangibles are super valuable. Build relationships with those who share the need for the same intangibles that you're building, which means local people who care about the same things we care about. Like a lot of our herd share community, a lot of these families are local. They're city people with good paying jobs, and they want their kids to grow up with some rural context rather than just grow up in the cities. So I've had some conversations like, hey, if I buy this number of herd shares, can I come to your property and take my kids fishing in the river and like go out swim and hike and do these kinds of outdoor things? I'm like, oh, yeah, absolutely. You're part of the family now. Like we gotta like ask me permission and like coordinate when you're here, but like I'd love to open my place up to you and like you're a part of the tribe. And so those intangibles are real enough value that it's actually getting those people to buy in with me. The nutrient dense food, the healthy ecology locally, which is good for the families who live close to this, right? Like, there's a lot of benefits there that are non financial. Venture capital has been trying to get into agriculture and just been losing their shirt. There's more and more big activist money trying to move this direction. The problem is that they don't have enough understanding of the root issues to be able to fix them, and they're basically putting their money into things that are getting advertised to them through like the big business world as if they're the future, and they're just not really good ideas. Those people are slowly learning where the edge is of where the real value creators are in this regenerative economy that's being grown here. And that energy is going to come more and more towards real solvers and real solution creators. We just have to, back to miracles take a lot of hard work, so you have to hold open the space until they arrive. We have to keep pushing forward education, building relationships that care about the same intangibles, and doing it in a way where we're winning, and doing so solving the root problems where the people that care about it can find us to join in with us.
I love that. I have one final question. Through this whole journey, from dating back to college to now, could just be one story or just one aspect, or just what has been one of your favorite parts of this journey?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'm going to need a minute to think about that one. I think my favorite part has been the stepping out on faith to be obedient to the call of what I feel happening here and the miracles that happen along the way. There's been so many days where I feel like I'm losing hope and I'll just get a phone call and it'll be somebody like, hey, like, I pray about you guys all the time because I believe what you guys are doing. How you guys doing? Your heads up? How you guys still in it? I'm like, man, I'm feeling discouraged today. And the guy's like, all right, well, good, because I just heard in my morning prayer time today that I'm supposed to kick in this to help you solve X problem. So here you go. It's like, buddy, I've been wrestling with this all week. Like, how'd you know? It's like, I was just praying about it. Like, Father knew, you know? That has happened almost every time the last 4 years I've gotten close to losing heart. The story that gives me hope and has kept me on the road has been the fact that I'm doing this where I'm not alone. And it's not just not alone with the families that are building with us, but I'm not alone in the fact that I truly have lived a world where God has had my back, and He is telling this story with us and sending me the favor, the resources, the people, and the allies I need in the moment I need them over and over and over again. It's like I told my core guys when we launched this project, like my main job as the leader is maintain connection to the favor of God. Because what we're doing is larger than what we're capable of our own. We're batting higher than our pay grade. And if we want to do that, we have to be authoring the story in a way where access to outcomes larger than us is possible. And that's through living with honor and character, where God is able to trust us to bring things to us because He knows we'll hold the line with honor and faithfulness. And that's been humbling, it's been an honor, it's been a privilege. And being able to rest in that has been a lot of how we've held hearts to maintain the courage of staying present as it's been hard day in and day out over and over again.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to finally visit. It's been a long time coming. I know I mentioned that yesterday, but it's cool that I think I remember whenever at first you had the big bushy beard
Yep.
and giant black top hat. So it's funny now sitting here, but yeah, man, this is beautiful. Love this conversation. So thank you again. I'm gonna end by shaking the hand that feeds you.
Build with the hand that feeds you. All right, so I want to introduce the two guys that made all this possible. My two right-hand guys, I've got Liam and Daniel. None of what's happened at Smoke River Ranch would have made without these guys. And we were talking earlier about the honor commitment to the community, where we're going to find a way no matter what it costs, and that entrepreneurship is having an accurate long-term thesis, and the stubbornness, persistence, and willingness to suffer to get there and adapt and see it actually come true. These guys have carried it with me in a way that I would have failed without them. So I wanted to, as part of just farm tour, show the guys that have been the heart and the muscle that's made it all happen. But Liam, I met you through Twitter. Go ahead and share with everybody here, like, why you joined the project here with me and what it's meant to you being a part of it.
Sure. Like you said, I met you through Twitter probably about almost 4 years ago now, right before we got the place. And just, I instantly, well, let me step back. I had an overwhelming feeling just ever since I graduated school, college, that America is not what it used to be. It, to be a nation, to be an actual country, you have to have a people that's rooted in a shared culture and especially a shared place. Like, you have to have that relationship between the people and the land. And in the modern world, America has basically become an economic zone and a stock exchange for the rest of the world. And we've managed to make ourselves very wealthy in fiat terms by absorbing the rest of the world's wealth by forcing our system onto the rest of them. But in the process, we've lost who we are as a people, as a nation. And while the political, you know, entity of the United States still exists, I think that the American dream, as we knew it, is dead. And I think what we're building here, and this is how I saw it when I joined, is that we are building the answer to that, the next iteration of the American dream, because it's not a one and done thing. It's the old one's dead, but there is going to be a new one, and that's what we're building here. We are restoring relationship from the relationship to the land, to each other as brothers and as families, and to our country. So that is why I'm here.
What's it meant to you to be a part of it here?
It's been, I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. I got a degree in finance, and I'm extremely glad that I'm not using it very much. So yeah, this has been, it seemed life has become a pretty rare commodity. We're too busy trying to survive in most of the world, but it's pretty hard to forget to live here.
Yeah, one of the things that always comes up for me talking with you guys is how I have a calling that I feel like God has given me, and it's been humbling and honoring to know that I can't accomplish it on my own and that I have to rely on others to see it come forth. And the privilege of getting to put my life beside you guys and build it with you, and to know that you guys are holding the line with me, has meant the world to me.
Did you ever have? Is there a microphone that I could ask him? Because I was just curious for you, Joel, through this real quick. Test, test. So, Joel, for you, did you ever have any, like from the beginning, issues of letting go in that regard, to where because what you're essentially saying is you're just surrendering to God in some way,
And surrendering to my brothers.
well, that's what, yeah,
through
through like surrendering to them through God in ways. So I was wondering, like from the beginning, did you have any issues, like internal issues or anything with that?
So, easy answer to that is I surrendered that a long time ago in my friendship with Daniel. We've been buddies since 2010. We met at VCU. And so much of what's happened in my life, of things I've discovered or built in the world that have been unique, have been because of his support. And there's been times in my life, like some of the major health issues I've faced, like I had, in 2016, I had mostly figured out how to manage my health through diet to beat the Crohn's stuff, but I was still fragile, and it was effort rather than real health and vitalism. And I had gotten into trying to figure out, okay, what's the root cause of why I'm struggling with the autoimmune Crohn's stuff? And I discovered that it was probably heavy metal toxicity, whether it was childhood vaccines or maybe like mercury exposure from eating too much seafood. And I started trying to do chelating, and chelating is kind of edgy science that nobody really knows a ton about yet. And I was working with one of the leading doctors in the nation with it. And I found the right knob, but turned it the wrong direction. I redistributed the heavy metals in my body. I basically became a vegetable, to where like autistic level, spin in circles, bang your head on the wall, can't carry a conversation for more than 30 seconds at the grocery store checkout line without needing 4 days to recover from it. Like, just burned out. It took me about 6 months to be able to be like human and talk to people again, about 18 months to become actually functional and reasonably normal. And during that time, Daniel kept our company alive, and I rang up 15, 20 grand of credit card debt trying to figure it out to get healthy again. And Daniel, as a brother, believed in what I was trying to build in my life. It was some of the early ethos and story that you see manifested today.
Yeah.
And he never really flinched or like gave me any hardship about it. He's just like, we're building something that matters in the world. You get better. I'll keep the ship afloat until you are, and then we'll go get it again together. And that was not just days. It was not just weeks. It was not just months. It was over a year of it. And a lot of that fear and vulnerability of learning to put weight on a real brother who I trust to hold the line with me, to give me the space I need to find the way through and get there. Daniel's love and help and support as a brother and the consistency of it just, I want to say, broke that out of me, slash like just also just wooed it out of me to where I learned to trust that that was real. And it laid a foundation to me that made it possible to be a leader capable of leading what's happening here, where I've been able to maintain hope and openness in a way that's drawn people in to build with me. But yeah, so Daniel, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
Why did you join the project? What's it been like seeing it from like where this was just a dream in our eyes a decade plus ago to where it is now? And what's it been like for you being a part of it?
Quite surreal, and to step slightly back, like with the story you just shared, from early on in our friendship, we talked about where our dreams overlapped and just shared dreams that we had for it overlapped into so many different things: human health, like community, vibrancy of like what God intended the human experience to be like, being raised into sons of God. But very early on, there was never a question of like, is this worth my time and effort to be a part of? Like, it was just very obvious, to the point where I stopped questioning it years ago about whether I wanted to be a part of it, whatever form it took. So, kind of moving to the ranch aspect as it is now, like I always loved being outside. I always loved listening to the land, being in relationship with the wildlife to whatever extent I could, and just all aspects of it, just listening and experiencing, being present with the land. So Joel started getting some cows, and I was able to free up some time and help him take care of them, and just fell in love with it because it was just another layer of being able to be out on the land. Sunshine, wind, even the rain, cold, extremes, all of it. In terms of like the bigger picture, I love being here because the scope of what we have dreamed about and are now building is literally limitless in terms of just so many different opportunities for business, for community, for just human thriving. And it's just, I always tell people, like, part of the reason I moved here is because, and fully committed, is just there's no other chance that I know to really experience human thriving and participate in it, be drawn into it, and even quite obviously help build it as well, just for myself, for my friends, my brothers, and for families to come.
I often think about where you told me years and years ago, like there's just has to be more to life than this.
Yeah.
Where one of my goals in leading this place has been to provide a place and to provide leadership, whether that's me mentoring you guys or providing access to Tim, my sage, with you guys, which is getting more regular now with your guys' regular calls and check-ins with him, where you guys have access to becoming, as young men, everything you have it in you to be. You're giving the equipping and the heart and all the layers of full life that goes so far beyond what your atomized one little box that most people experience, where they got their church community, their work community, their fitness community. Versus here, we're building something larger than life, and we're bringing all of us to it and growing into all we can be to see it come forth. Like I remember you told me years ago, and I've always kind of, one of the things that's kept me at it at times has gotten dark and hard, where you believed that I was going somewhere, and you could see that God was taking me somewhere that mattered, and you weren't going to get left behind from it. You were going to get there with me. It's very much kind of like Sam and Frodo, Lord of the Rings. And like the times it gets dark, I always remember that. It's like you see it, and you seeing it helps me to see it in the days it gets a little fuzzy.
Yeah. I mean, and a part of that is just that it's so real, just the challenges here and the struggles and the wins. They're just so all-encompassing, to your point, of just, it requires everything that we have, everything that I have, and obviously that sucks quite a lot, but
But
if
all
it
the good
didn't
things
suck,
do.
exactly, if it didn't suck, then it wouldn't be worth doing. And it just makes the both the journey and the each successive step we take forward just much more valuable.
Yeah, one of the experience we've had is the realness of it actually makes it hard for some people to participate with us. Because the full scope of being and heart requires a vulnerability of bringing your full self into it that scares the living daylights out of people. And the way that we do that, people are drawn to it, but they also, when it comes time to enter into it, they get scared of it and they hide from it. Like you've talked about that some, Liam, of like seeing that play forth with integrated full life and what that does to people. You got anything you want to add?
No, I think that covers it.
I would add that just that people are so used to having, like you mentioned, their different aspects of their life so segmented from each other, where intentional or not, it's easy to just bring part of yourself or one aspect of yourself to whatever dynamic you're engaging with, whatever thing you're working on. And that's just not possible with what we're doing here.
They have a diversified portfolio of life.
Yeah.
But we don't. We're all in. Sink or swim.
Yeah.
And that's what brings the places in us to the surface that still need to be worked on and still need healing or whatever the case may be. But if they don't come to light, then there's no chance to ever grow.
Yeah, because to build a world that's whole and works again, it requires us to be whole to forerun it.
Right.
And the intensity of that, the iron sharpens iron, it requires a level of humility, self-honesty, and grit to stay the course until we find it and become it to make it possible.
That was going to be my question, Joel, for you all, is just how do you, from like a management and just working together standpoint, what does that look like on a week-to-week basis of, do you have weekly meetings of just recapping the week and then game planning the next week, but then also, thinking about the long-term vision? How does that play together?
Oh yeah, we've got quarterly meetings about the vision, where we're at on our executables and goals. We got weekly check-ins. We're doing regular touch-in of like, okay, this is our responsibility. You failed at this. This was actually, you need to grow in character, but carry more weight as a leader. And then what do we have to do to grow to be able to conquer and do more? One of the things that I've made one of our goals with the guys that get put into leadership with me is that the standard to be a leader is to be able to exist to where you're carrying the vision and the will, and you're largely misunderstood in the world while you're doing it, often maligned and accused because the world doesn't see you. Yet you still hold and create space by comporting and carrying yourself with grace to draw the world into you, into your space, into your leadership as you redeem that over and over to create opportunity for other people to row alongside with us. And it's that leadership and will rooted in grace that's made this possible, where we've been able to hold this space long enough to have other people join in. And that heart to do that, these guys carry with me, it's the secret sauce. And there's nothing around that besides just loving each other, loving the vision, loving God, and loving the world we're trying to create.
And just not shying away from the rawness of it.
Even when it hurts.
Yep.
Maybe especially when it hurts. Yeah, it's been a privilege. We're a good number of years in, and we're tighter than we've ever been, building something more
Agreed.
beautiful with more people joining every day.
I always tell myself and other people when it's appropriate, just like, no matter how rough it gets, just there's no place else I'd rather be and nothing else I'd rather be doing.
And doing it here with you guys.
Yeah.
Hoorah.
Indeed.
Visit www.theregenesancecode to learn more.